Testing 1 2. Testing 1 2.
Give me 1 minute, I'll put that on.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Shelby County Board of Education's February 20th work session. Ms. Anthony, please call the roll.
Board Member Caldwell. Board Member Orgel. Board Member Woods. Board Member Love. Board Member McCormick. Board Member Jones.
Here.
Board Member Bibbs. Board Member Cornell.
Here.
Board Chair Avant.
Present.
You have 7 present.
We have a quorum. We're going to now stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. And I'd like to ask people to remain standing for a moment of silence. During this moment of silence, please remember to keep in your thoughts the following individuals: Destiny Moore of Ford Road Elementary, Nicholas Milligan, Kingsbury High, Audra Reed, Kingsbury High, and David Cornell, son of Board Member Mike Cornell. Please keep all of these students, faculty, and families who were also impacted by the shootings in the Parkland, Florida area. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. You may be seated. Now we're moving to the approval of the agenda. The question is on the approval of agenda. If there are any amendments, okay? Seeing no amendments to the agenda, we are ready for a vote. Roll call, please.
Board Member Caldwell.
Aye.
Board Member Orgel. Board Member Woods. Board Member Love. Board Member McCormick. Board Member Jones. Board Member Bibbs. Board Member Cornell.
Aye.
Board Chair Avant.
Aye.
You have 7 ayes.
Have a quorum. The agenda is approved. We're now moved to my report. I wanted to thank all the board members who came out to help us celebrate with the United Shelby Council PTA Founders Day program that was held here on February 8th in the Barnes Auditorium. It was great to see so many community folks who came out to support the United Shelby County PTA, but to see how many of the individuals have been involved in both the Shelby PTA as well as the Legacy Memphis PTA, and really great to see the momentum that they've gained over the last year since they have formed the new Shelby County PTA. So I want to thank board members who came out to support. I'd also like to thank board members who were able to attend the TSBA Day on the Hill. We had great conversation with our Tennessee legislatures. Thanks to Scott McCormick, Teresa Jones, Miska Clay Bibbs, Kevin Woods, and Ms. Love, who were able to attend. And I appreciate the superintendent and Mr. Woods for the great presentation that they were able to present to the education subcommittee. I'd also like to take a moment and just highlight, I had an opportunity to visit Valentine School. Thanks to Dr. Ray and Ms. Phillips for creating some space for some great adoptive school partners who are really wanting to support Valentine and the great work that they're doing. I got to represent Ms. Jones on her behalf with her school in her district, and they're doing great things under the leadership of Ms. Jackson, so I appreciate the hosting of that event. And I'd like to move on to the superintendent report.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We have a couple presentations that we want to make, so I'll be very brief. Just our hearts and thoughts and prayers continue to go out to our colleagues in Broward County, Florida. I know that Chief Darling and his crew, Major Jackson, we had a good meeting with the principals to kind of talk about some safety plans, and I know there's some revised safety plans, and obviously safety is the most important thing that we do, and just didn't want to not acknowledge what happened. With that said, I also want to just take about 10 seconds and thank General Counsel Rodney Moore for 2 years of extraordinary service here. As the board knows, he will be leaving to go back to Atlanta to spend more time with his family. I'm just so proud of the work that he's done. Jennifer Irvin will be serving as interim general counsel. So just wanted to say thank you, Rodney. We appreciate your service. With that said, I guess we will move to our KPI presentation.
Is this okay? Making sure this microphone is on. Good afternoon, everyone. Today's KPIs have a lot of different measures related to school culture and climate. So we'll go into suspension rates by subgroup, group and number of instructional days lost, student satisfaction with school climate via survey, and then teacher ratings of principals via survey. So starting with our school suspension trends, the way that we're going to present this is similar to how the state calculates suspension rate. They look at the percentage of students who have had one or more out-of-school suspensions or expulsions. So regardless of how many suspensions they've had, they're looking at the student level data for that, if that makes sense. So over the past 4 years, over the same period of time, we continue to see a steady decline in the percentage of students who have been suspended. And we also see a decline, looking at the blue bars, at the number of instructional days that have been lost. Now, one thing to note very quickly about this current year is that as we transition to Power School, it's possible on the days lost that this could be a little bit underreported because principals and administrators are now reporting suspensions both as a discipline panel and an attendance panel separately. So if they happen to enter that information in one place but not the other, it won't be reflected here. But they're aware of it, and I know that our student information team has had some conversation with Power School on how to amend that. So just a quick note on that. And my remote does not want to go forward. Okay. So the rest of these we'll just be looking at a 3-year trend throughout the entire school year from 2014-15 to 2016-17. So first you're looking at suspension rate throughout the course of the year by race and ethnicity subgroups. So we do see a decline in most of our subgroups and in the district as a whole in the suspension rate over time. We see that the suspension rate is still higher for our black students than for our white and Hispanic students. And then for our other students that fall outside of those categories, the suspension rate has increased a little bit, but this is also a very small group. It comprises less than 5% of our overall student population, so it may be a little bit more sensitive to year-to-year changes in enrollment. Looking at the same information by gender, sorry, my remote's acting a little weird on me. You can see for male and female students the breakdown of suspensions. So male students are suspended. This is haunted right now, I apologize for that. Our male students, all right, I'm really not touching anything. Sorry, something's going on with this. Let's see if we can go back and keep it there. Okay. All right, well, I'm going to keep this here and hopefully it'll stay put. Never mind. So I can tell you that our male students tend to have a higher suspension rate from our female students, but that those rates are continuing to decline for both groups. Our students with disabilities are having a higher rate of suspension than students without disabilities, but it's also declining. We have had pretty low rates of suspensions overall for English learners compared to non. So that's essentially what the suspension data is saying, and I apologize that my remote's just going nuts. I'm going to try and go back to where I was. So the second thing we were looking at for you was around teacher ratings of principals. So this is based on the Insight survey that teachers take twice a year. We typically get somewhere between an 80 and an 85% response rate across the district, which is really good. So here you can see we pulled out just a couple questions that pertain to student climate or school culture and leadership effectiveness. So on this first one that you see a lot of times with Insight is my school is a good place to teach and learn. So you can see across the district we have about 80% agreement on that, and that's improved a little bit over time. What you also see is it's broken down into quartiles based on each school's overall index score. and that's based on weighted 3 different questions. So you can see that even though overall we have a pretty strong 80% agreement, which is good when you compare the top quartile schools that are in the blue to the bottom quartile schools in the gray, there's about a 30% point difference between what those top schools agree with versus the bottom quartile schools. So the other thing that we looked at in terms of insight was also just my school has an effective instructional leader. So again, we've seen some improvement in teachers' agreement with this over time from 79% 3 years ago to 83% last year. But again, when you look at that by those quartiles, there is some difference between our top and bottom quartile schools. So last thing on the insight front is just, overall, what are teachers most likely to agree with and least likely to agree with out of the different statements that are available on the insight survey. So on the top ones, we do see that teachers feel very certain about what the criteria are that will be used to evaluate their performance, that they feel that their teachers at their school track performance well with students looking at measurable academic goals, and then that the school is committed to improving instructional practice. So those are all our strongest percent agreement across the district, and they all hover around 90%. At the bottom, you'll notice that the items that we are rating lowest on most frequently all have to do with the evaluation itself. And a lot of these really have to do with district and state policy. They're not necessarily things that the school building has control over, but agreeing with the criteria that are being used, that the ratings are accurate, and then that the evaluation process is helping identify strengths and weaknesses. Any questions so far? Okay, our final area that we're looking at for KPIs this month is around tripods. So this is also something that students take at least once a year, and in some cases twice a year, that reflect a classroom or a couple of classrooms that they're in, and those are randomly selected. So here, unfortunately, we don't have the question level information. That's not something that Tripod provides back to us, but you can see a scaled score for how our schools are doing over time. And just to give you a sense of what this means, that scale is between 202 and 398, and the median score across all of the different districts that use this is 300. So anything above 300 is above average. And so we pulled out 3 different domains. They're called the 7 C's on Tripod, but 3 domains that we thought most closely reflected school culture and climate. So here you can see care, meaning that that teacher is caring and builds a strong relationship with the student. Captivate, meaning that they have really engaging lessons and something that the student feels really strongly engaged in. And then classroom management is the last one on the right. And so that's all just around having good policies and procedures, being able to deal proactively with student behavior so that the focus can be on instruction. And so on the composite overall, our teachers have improved over time. On care and captivate, they've also improved over time. We've seen a little bit of a slide back with classroom management, but still overall, that's a pretty strong indicator for us compared to the others. So here you can look at those same things broken out by different grade bands. And so these scores are scaled for each grade band. So 300 is still the standard that you would be looking for to know if we're doing better or worse than other districts that are part of Tripod. And so in each instance, you can still see that we are performing above that 300 level at all grade levels. So the blue is early elementary, which is K through 2. The red is upper elementary, which is 3 through 5. And then you have middle school and high school reflected. And we do especially well with our early elementary grades on Tripod. Okay, last slide is just around how at each grade band we've improved or changed over time. And so you can really see between the spring 2016 administration and the spring 2017 administration that we've had our most improvement at the middle and upper grade level in high school. But we all know that based on this previous slide that our early elementary teachers are also performing, pretty well overall. So it's not that surprising or alarming, perhaps, to see them show a little bit of decline, because overall they're still being rated pretty highly on Tripod. All right. Any questions before we get into our recommendations?
Board Member Caldwell.
So I'm looking at I think the first slide, or the Tripod scores. So I realize that anything. So would you say a 300, is average? So you're saying the 300's a C?
Yep.
Okay. So it looks like to me, if you take the composite score, there was a 2.5% increase. And so do we set goals, or do we have any kind of thing we're looking for? I mean, where are we trying to go? I mean, are we happy at above 300, or should we be higher than that? I mean, the average may be one thing, but the districts that are really doing well, what do their numbers look like?
Yeah, I guess we could probably see what the distribution looks like throughout the district, but I don't know if any of our HR academic leads could speak to goals that have been set. Or I know on the individual teacher evaluation, it's broken down into quintiles, and so getting a level 4 or level 5 score means that they are performing in the upper quintiles of these kinds of scores.
Okay, thank you.
Well, if there's no further questions, then these are some of the recommendations that we wanted to highlight. So one is with the Student Equity Enrollment and Discipline team, increasing allocations to provide intensified site monitoring, implementation, and training for ESSA-related attendance and discipline protocols. So you probably know that ESSA includes some measures around chronic absenteeism, and that also is impacted by out-of-school suspensions and expulsions. So there's definitely a heavy focus on that. Also that the SEED team has issued an attendance manual and a 3-tiered intervention manual to help schools really know, A, how to enter that data correctly and improve their data quality, but also make sure that they are appropriately supporting students based on the degree to which they're having attendance and discipline problems. Also increasing capacity to help schools maintain supervised study and intervention settings that help us reduce exclusionary discipline practices like out-of-school suspensions and expulsions. And then for the other measures that we've talked about, outlining processes to balance support provided to teachers for both classroom management and content, since we see that's kind of a continual need. Researching student survey options that are used in comparable districts to see if we have a good fit now or we might want to change that over time. And then finally, just improving the quality of our teacher evaluation feedback based on what you saw with our insight data, so that we can increase informal observations like IPGs, and also utilize rubric crosswalks so that teachers understand how the new curriculum resources that they have align with the observations and feedback that they're receiving on the TEM. All right, so with that, just so you know what's coming up next time around, we will focus on grades 1 through 3 reading and math measures, and then also Lexile levels, which are a measure of the complexity of the text that students are able to read, and it really helps us assess college and career readiness early on.
I had a question if there weren't any others from board members. When you're talking about how SEED will provide the training to staff, are you saying to principals? What is it, every staff person within the school, and what does the training look like that they'll provide?
Members of the board, yes, SEED prepared a booklet, All Things ESSA, a guide to help chronically absent students and discipline. This is something that we're going to share with all of our principals, hopefully at the next Principals Institute. But this is a book that has a 3-tiered approach, and that captures all things district-wide as far as training principals and teachers in discipline.
So, Mr. Ray, when you're saying training principals and teachers, I know that obviously our office staff are kind of frontline to how some of these things are implemented. So when we're saying training, if we're talking about training and intervention throughout the school, I guess, the secretaries, all of those all administrative staff that are kind of our front office, first line of communication with parents, is that the training included? Are they included in that training process, or are you leaving it to principals to do that training?
So we're leaving to principals. However, we can circle back with the team, and if that's the board's desire, we can definitely provide that training to them as well.
Okay, and I'm just asking because if we're talking about what the intervention processes look like, obviously those people would be involved in that process, and I think it would be helpful for the board to understand how you're kind of operationalizing that, because I know we will have some pretty strict benchmarks that we're trying to reach as far as ESSA, and as we're thinking about this, I just want us to be thoughtful through all those processes.
Yes, ma'am. Do we know?
Seeing no further questions, We'll move on to action items. Did you have, oh, you had one more, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Board. Also, spend some time. I know the Board is aware that we received some information from the state about a week and a half ago around 2 specific school actions. Specifically, the state has said it's going to recommend that Hawkins Mill be closed because of its priority status. They also have indicated that they intend to place American Way Middle School in the ASD the year after next. And what they have said is that they're giving us the option of either going through an RFP process and authorizing a charter school from our perspective, or the ASD will just take the school and place it and match it with an operator. So to tee the discussion up, I thought it would make some sense for the Board to understand how the whole priority tracks have been changed and tweaked in the way that the state is now thinking about its priority schools. So I'm going to ask Dr. Burt to give a quick presentation on that. And it's also going to list all of our priority schools so the Board is clear in terms of what treatments those schools are receiving right now and what the status of those schools are as it relates to conversations that we've been having with the Commission over the last few weeks. And I think finally I just want to make sure we get some guidance from the Board on the state-specific request around American Way Middle and Hawkins Mill. Dr. Burt.
Thank you, Superintendent Hobson. Good evening, board members and constituents. So, July 1, 2017, the Office of School Improvement was formed by the state of Tennessee, Tennessee Department of Education. With that, 3 guiding principles outline this department. 1, empower districts to really be creative and do what's in the best interest of students. Also, invest in what works, but more importantly, really hold districts accountable to ensure that students can't wait on schools to improve. This new office really has 5 key areas or factors that they look at when making a decision about a particular school. How long has that school been on a priority list? We know that the last 2 priority lists was ran in 2012 and 2014. Also, the overall TVOS composite, the 1-year success rate of a school across all subjects. So when we think about success rate, we have to keep in mind that's factoring in ELA, math, science, based on the number of actual students that took the assessment. The length of time that's been in the current intervention, what's the feeder pattern strength, but also the graduation rate. Those factors are what the Office of School Improvement really looks at when they're deciding what's the best solution for a particular school. This graphic really outlines the 3 tracks that schools are being held accountable to as of now. We have Alpha, Beta, and Delta. Delta is schools that have really been on a state priority list for only 1 year. Beta are schools that have been on 2 priority lists. The only caveat or difference between an Alpha and a Beta is a Beta school has scored a single year TVOS 4 or 5 within that time period. And Alpha schools have made a TVOS 3 or less. So Alpha and Beta are very similar. The difference is TVOS. TVOS 4 or 5 compared to TVOS 3 or less. And Beta schools have been in an intervention 3 years or more. One point to note on this graph, where you see proof point, the proof point is every year when students take the 10 Ready assessment. So whichever track that students are in, on a yearly basis, when the 10 Ready assessment is given, that proof point is how well they perform on that assessment. So you can begin, if a school's a Delta this year, when this year's results come in, they could very well drop to a Beta, determining on how well they perform on this year's 10 Ready assessment. Delta schools are schools that have recently been on a 2014 priority list. So we have a few schools that are classified as Deltas based on they were on the most recent priority list. The next priority list will come out this summer. The state is saying that it will come out by July 31st, but no later than August 1. So we'll see where our schools fall within that time period. Beta schools. I think it's important for us to make note of the number of years that schools stay in an intervention. Beta schools are schools that have been in intervention for 2 years or less. Our district interventions that we now have are I-zone and E-zone. So those are really the only 2 interventions that the state recognized as far as district intervention, that kids are getting something different than other traditional schools. A beta school, even though you're beta this year, their proof point is on a yearly basis. So we have, I think it's 7 schools that's betas this year. Those 7 schools, when the results come out this summer, their proof point will be how well they perform this year to decide if they go to alpha or they drop down to delta. K-8 schools will be measured on a 2-year period, and our high schools will be on a 3-year period. So our K-8 schools will roll off the previous year, and they'll be held accountable for this last school year and this school year. High schools is a 3-year trend data point. And alpha schools are TVOS 3 or less, but they've been a district intervention for 3 years or more. One point to note is within alpha, there's also 2 distinguishing characteristics. You can be an alpha 1 or an alpha 2. If you're in the alpha status, you really would want to be an alpha 2 and not an alpha 1. Alpha 2 is basically saying that the district and the school has done something recently to show that there's signs of hope within the school. For example, during the call with the commissioner, she really highlighted and pointed out Tresvant. Tresvant is currently an alpha school, but she applauded the superintendent on the move of like the leadership change and also the early indicators that's showing that that school is trending in the right direction. She cited the discipline data, teacher retention, suspension data. So those factors made her believe like we need to wait with Tresvant and see how well they perform this year before we jump to categorize them as an alpha 1. So that's the one difference between an alpha 1 and alpha 2. There has to be signs of improvement throughout the process. If you look at the second bullet on this slide, it also points out that factors that play into this decision, whether you're alpha 1 or alpha 2, is the strength of the feeder pattern, the individual success rate, but also enrollment is a determining factor as well. Based on if schools fall in the alpha track, you have 5 options that the Office of School Improvement and the Commissioner can recommend. We have 2 schools that received 2 different recommendations based on the power that's invested in this office as of July 1. You see option 1 is to match the school with a charter operator. Option 2 would be partner with the ASD. Option 3 is to continue the current district's intervention. If it's working, that means the school is showing signs of TVOS 4 or 5. Option 4 would be the commissioner can propose a new state partnership between the state and the school district. That's what we see currently in Hamilton County, where those schools that's in priority status, it's a partnership between state TDOE and that school district. And option 5 is to close the school altogether. Once again, Alpha Track 1 schools are schools that have a TVOS 3 or less, and they've been in some form of intervention 3 years or more. And this is a graph depicting what the tracks look like. Based on the beta track, all K-8 schools, the threshold for K-8 schools that have been set is 15%. So 15% is the threshold that the Office of School Improvement will measure school success by. For high schools, the success rate has to reach 9% or higher. This year we had 3 schools that exited out of priority status: Treadwell Elementary School, Mitchell High School, and Northwest Prep. These are the current schools that fall into Delta track. And remember, Delta are schools that have been on one priority list. So these schools were on the most recent priority list in 2014. From a district perspective, we probably have to make a close look at the schools that, when we think about, building utilization, which school from an enrollment perspective may fall under that cap, because those are areas that the state looks at very heavily. These are our beta schools. The big school as far as beta that jumps out would be Westwood High School. Westwood High School is also a part of our I-zone, so it's receiving our current district intervention, but it's also a building that we have to look at as far as building utilization, because if, let's say for instance, this year Westwood High happens to slip from beta to alpha, then it would go into that track as far as feeder pattern, building utilization, student enrollment. So it's one like we would really need to have a lot of conversation around. The other schools that's listed on this slide as betas, they're currently in the district intervention. They're part of the I-zone now. Last slide shows the alpha schools. The top two schools, American Way and Hawkins Mills, are the schools that we received the current recommendation around. Recommendation for American Way was to partner with a charter operator, but to begin in 2019. So that's 2 years away. Hawkins Mill, the recommendation was around school closure. The other schools listed, they're listed as Alpha 2s, meaning they have this year to really prove that they'll have a strong proof point. At the end of this school year, the Office of School Improvement will reevaluate these schools and come back with the district with a recommendation around their status. All schools that's listed below Hawkins Mill are also a part of the district's intervention. They're all I-zone schools. If you look at the 3 tracks, there's 21 schools total. 14 of the 21 schools are currently in the I-zone. So those 14 schools are currently receiving district intervention. The question is, how long has they been in the intervention? That's the piece that's factored in throughout the process. This is some data around American Way and Hawkins Mill. Current enrollment of American Way is roughly 706 students. The principal has been at the school 2 years. Priority track is Alpha 1. The success rate is listed next to the year. So the success rate of American Way as of the 2014 priority school list is 2.6%, meaning it falls in the bottom 5%. And in 2012, it was 3.8. The state really measures the length of time for the school leader at the school. The magic number as far as principal is 3. 3 years or more, that's considered a trend point. So that's factored into the decision as well. The overall SPF composite for American Way is 1.07. In the last 2 years, they had a TVOS composite of level 1. The literacy and math on track and mastery is listed. Literacy was 16.6 and math was 3.4%. Hawkins Mill enrollment is roughly 335 students. The principal has been at the school 5 years. They're Alpha 1. On the 2014 priority list, their success rate was 3.0, and on 2012 it was 2.7. SPF composite is 1.27. In 2017 they had a TVOS composite of level 1. In 2016 they had a TVOS composite of level 3. Literacy on track and mastery is 5.4, and math is 12.4. Any questions around the track far as alpha, beta, or delta?
Board Member Jones.
I didn't have a question. I guess one other category you listed the enrollment. I would like to know the capacity, the programmatic capacity for each school that was listed there.
Yes, ma'am. We can provide that information.
You can continue.
That completes the presentation.
Mr. Cornell.
Thank you. What I like to see is, I would like to see the TVOS formula from the state explained. I'd like to see the figures that were put into the TVOS formula from what we have given them or what they've given us. and show how that worked to come up with the result. And I'd like to see the census tract characteristics of each school's feeder zone. And then third, and there may be more later, I'm sorry, but third is, I'd like to know which schools have taken on mergers from other schools. And I would like to see the characteristics of each of those cohort of students and how that contributes to the principal's result, or the result of the school.
So in regard to TVOS, TVOS is really the measure of 1 year's growth that students receive. So if you walk into the school year with a particular scale score, that's then measured over a given year. That teacher then receives what's known as a mean growth index to really say, did they meet 1 year's of learning or more? But the state uses a really detailed algorithm to come up with that index, but we definitely can provide that information.
Yeah, I know we have the conclusion. I'm fine with what you're doing and everything. I'm not trying to say that your conclusions are wrong or anything, or your categories are wrong. Everything seems to be well done. What I'm saying is, I want to see how our statistics, our figures are entered into the state TVOS, and how it plays through that algorithm to come up with the conclusion of the state.
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you very much. Thank you for all your hard work.
Ms. Love.
Is this question time, Superintendent? Okay, so first, dealing with Hawkins Mill, I would like to ask our General Counsel a question. So dealing with Hawkins Mill, does the state of Tennessee have the authority to tell us to close the school down?
No.
Okay, so based on what General Counsel just stated, Superintendent, what is your recommendation?
Well, I think that, as you know, Ms. Love, that the Hawkins Mill is, one of our critical focus schools, and I have concerns about the school building, the facilities itself. But I do think that when we start talking about critical focus schools, we committed to giving schools a couple years with the additional resources to see if they can improve student achievement, and if they could attract students. And this is really year one of that. I do want to echo what Mr. Moore said. I think that the state certainly didn't have the authority to make us close the school, and I think it's around a recommendation. So given what we said to schools, I think that I would prefer to stay the course in terms of the critical focus path that we have gone down. But I do think, Ms. Love, and I'm sure you agree, like we got to get going at Hawkins Mill. I mean, just in terms of some of the data we've seen, but I don't think the board should be forced to close something by the state.
Okay. So, and I will, as a board member, I've been on the board since 2014, and I know that before I became a board member, I knew the challenges of Hawkins Mill because I lived in that community. And I know since I've been a board member, I've been screaming that we must help Hawkins Mill. In 2017, we did include Hawkins Mill into the critical focus school list. I know that their attendance has increased, their behavior has the issues, some of the behavior issues, negative issues have decreased. I know the suspension has decreased. What I would challenge you, Superintendent, and your staff is to take a ride in that neighborhood so you can see exactly, so you can see personally the issues that our children are facing and why I've been stating for 4 years that that school needs help. I appreciate, the support that you have given that school, but I would also like to see more work being done around actually asking Mr. Harvey and his teachers what they need, because I know we put plans in place, but if we're not actually giving them what they need to help the children because of the issues that they come to school with, it's not going to be effective. And so we can all be clear, I am in no support of closing down Hawkins Mill Elementary. And as we talk about schools in that area, ASD directly runs all of their schools in the Fraser community. Those schools are not excelling. They were supposed to go from the bottom 5 to the top 25. They have not made it there yet. But I do know we have 2 I-Zone schools who have made it there. So when we talk about what we can do at Shelby County Schools as a board member, we have what it takes to fully educate our children. Yes, there are challenges in the community. Yes, there are challenges in the home. But I believe if we all come together and do what we need to do, and we may have to do more. We may have to turn it into an I-Zone. But superintendent, whatever we need to do to save that school and increase the academics in that school and let our principal and our teachers and the parents and the students in that school know that we support them 100%, we're going to have to do it.
So I will say, Ms. Love, I think that, when we did the critical focus plans, the principal was very involved in terms of, had a lot of say-so in terms of what they wanted to do with the extra resources. And I will say, Ms. Love, I actually have driven by there a couple times, and I think one of the key drivers that we look at, I think there's just, there's just so much, the population is so transient. Like, we have so much turnover, which makes it tough. But I also say too, Ms. Love, and you know this too, the building condition is not great, and we need to think about that. But I agree. I think that ultimately the decision of whether to close the school should rest with the school board.
And so even with the building condition, because I know we've talked about that, so that's a conversation that, like I've told you, we do need to have, and it's not just with Hawkins Mill, but other schools as well. So when we're ready to have that tough conversation, I'm willing to have it. But like I stated, if the state of Tennessee has no authority to tell us to close a school down, we should be in no position to close Hawkins Mill down. And if we do it, it needs to be on our terms, our time, saying that we're going to close it down to build a new school.
Ms. Bibbs.
Thank you, Chair. There are a couple of things that I wanted to, great presentation as far as giving us the real information, Superintendent. A couple of things that jumped out for me out the gate was we're looking at 21 schools. This is a prime opportunity for us to come up with a true treatment around these schools and their feeder patterns. My colleague, board member Cornell, did talk about feeder patterns, and I think a lot of times we forget that the kids don't just show up and all of a sudden stop doing what they were doing. We need to figure out how to touch them at every touch point along the way, and this is an opportunity. I'm going to challenge my board colleagues around, well, what are we saying around what we want to do to be able to touch our kids? So then that way it's not just 21 schools. We need to be looking at whole communities around schools and understanding that we need to touch all of them in this touch point. So we're not always talking about, oh, well, what do we do now at this point? So holistically looking at communities. Of course, out the gate with American Way Middle, I'm definitely not in support of listening to the state around this, because how are you going to tell us as a district that we don't have an opportunity to place American Way Middle in I-Zone, which is what I'm definitely recommending tonight via resolution, because what you're suggesting is something that's not working. Like, it would be, that's a whole different conversation to me. Even around, like, I think about the fight that we fought regarding Sheffield Elementary, and I see that there's still conversation around it right now as one of those 21 schools, which at that point in time, I was really pushing around, let's figure out how to touch these kids so then that way when they show up in middle school and high school, we know who they are and what they need, instead of them showing up day one, oh, we somehow we forgot. So again, going back to touching whole communities, I-Zone all day long is showing better results than ASD. I think it's kind of crazy in which the state can tell us, oh, no, you don't have an opportunity to put them in I-Zone, when we know that that's a proof positive for us that's working for most of our schools. So I am recommending that regarding American Way Middle. I want to know how much money it takes to make this happen, and I'm really requesting true data assessments of all of our kids, where they are, where they're dropping off, so that way first 6th graders, 7th graders, and 8th graders can absolutely, every child in that building should have some type of treatment of what they need in order to be successful in that building. It can no longer be change a principal, changing an extra hour. It has to be a holistic approach around what these kids need, so we can know really what they need as far as intervention-wise. And I think that's what's missing in a lot of what we're saying we're doing. I want to look at that honestly for all of our schools that are the 21 that are on the list, and let's start looking at feeder patterns in communities.
And I didn't even say, Ms. Reza, just could you speak to Dr. Bird? I think that to your point, a lot of the discussion, the way the state is thinking now as they make decisions, it has to do with feeder patterns. Can you speak to that, Dr. Burgess? We talked about that yesterday.
Yeah, so the feeder pattern success rate is definitely factored in. So if you take like American Way Middle School, the state would then go down to the elementary school to look at their success rate and then go up to Sheffield High School. One of the, and I'm Commissioner Board, I think your comment is spot on. We really have to look at the feeder pattern for as vertical alignment to make sure elementary students really walk into middle school grade level ready and also walking into high school. So the state says of those 3 schools in the feeder pattern, what's the overall success rate, and then what's the likelihood that each kid leaving one grade band going to the next has at being successful, and that's factored into a middle school or individual schools category. So if you have American Way Middle, then they look at the elementary high school, and if they're in a low percentile, that will also hurt the middle school.
Thank you. I think that's kind of what I'm looking for. I think, we can have moving a school to I-Zone, which I think is absolutely the right way for American Way Middle for the 18-19 school year. But I want us to approach this from the standpoint of making sure they get everything they need in order to be able to win. And that's the way I want us to look at this. I think we also need to have that hard look, us as a board, around, yes, we have 21 schools that are on this list, but that number should be higher, quite honestly, for us to do true treatments around these schools, because the elementaries feed into middle and the middle schools are feeding into highs. And we need to look at it holistically around what our treatments look like.
And if I could add, one point with that, it's important for us to be cognizant of, from a federal perspective, the magic number is always going to be 3 in low-performing schools. So the original school improvement grant, you had 2 models that you could choose from, transformation or turnaround. Those models required that school to show high levels of performance within 3 years. That's the metric that the state still applies. That's why 3 is considered a trend, because after 3 years, they're saying basically students can't wait. So if the leader hasn't shown significant progress in 3 years, then more significant decisions are made.
Thank you.
Board Member Caldwell.
Yes, I just had some questions around. I know when they first talked about ESSA that the state said that, there were going to be more resources for each school that was in the bottom. So I was talking to Chief Johnson, and I'm not sure I got it right, but I thought some of it involved of the state moving the Title I money. So is there new money that we haven't gotten before, or what kind of resources are they providing us? Extra resources, really.
Happy to. So with the school improvement grant, that grant has gone away. So what the state has done is that part of the to pay for the intervention is to use Title I funds, and there's a portion that the state is going to earmark for interventions for these priority schools.
So they're not giving us any more money. They're just taking a piece of the money we would have gotten anyway and then telling us how to use it. And that's extra support. I'm just trying to understand.
Well, to a certain extent, that's the mechanics of it. Now, whether the state has received additional funding from the federal government to do that with the SIG grants being removed, is to be seen right now. What's happening in terms of our federal fund is that we're seeing a decline in our federal grants, and I think the only additional resources that we received was Title IV. But yes, to your overall question, they are taking a portion of Title I and they're earmarking that to be distributed back across the state.
And then if I'm not mistaken, because of the merger, the municipal districts get more for their Title I kids than we do.
Right. So this
So-
was the first year where the municipal schools receive additional funds. Yes.
So they're ignoring that. We got kicked in the shin and then kicked in the stomach. My words, I'm not asking you to comment.
Board Member Love.
Dr. Burke, when you spoke about you said the success rate, so they take in consideration elementary, middle, and high school?
In that particular feeder pattern, yes.
Is that all feeder patterns that have schools and the bottom 5% is just, are we just only speaking about the 21 schools that you had listed?
All schools. So we have more than 21 schools that's on the original list, but these are 21 that fall within the 3 tracks. But they look at all feeder patterns for each school that actually are part of the state assessment. So all elementary, all middle, and all high schools.
Okay, so this goes back to what Board Member Bibb stated. So what are we currently doing now to make sure that our feeder schools know each other and they know and understand the issues as it relates to academics, behavior, community issues? Because I know I've spoken to the superintendent and to Dr. Griffin about making sure that our schools know each other. So going back to what Board Member Bibb stated, I don't know if you guys already have something that you're working on now, but I think that's something that if you're already working on it, I think we need to expedite that plan so that we can make sure that we are taking care of all children. Because when we think about Hawkins Mill, Georgian Hills Middle, and Tresnant, you know, and all of those are priority schools, and they didn't just get there overnight. So, has there been any conversation, any plan, or is this just new and it's something you guys are working on? How long has this initiative from the state of Tennessee been out?
Well, their office was formed July 1, but this most recent list was released.
17?
Yeah.
This most recent list came out February 5th, identifying the 3 different tracks.
Okay. So as a board member, I guess I would like to see know what you guys have in place or what you're planning or what you're working on, so we as a board can know if there's any additional things that we need to do. But you guys are the experts in this, so I guess first I would like to see what you guys have and or what you're doing, and if it's not working, maybe we need to try something different.
Yeah, so me and my colleagues in the academics team, we definitely identified this. We're actually going through the process of developing a plan, grouping the schools based on where they are. So when we look at it, we're looking at schools that all the priority schools, put them in a group or track together and really break down the silos of elementary schools, just associating with elementary schools, but making sure that the vertical piece is in place with the elementary, middle, and high schools. So we're working on that plan now. Our ISW week, as far as how we design professional development, we revamped that to make sure all people within the building is receiving support. So we really got to make sure that support is more widespread across K through 12 and not just K5, 6, 8, or 9, 12.
Okay. And even dealing with a plan, or maybe with you guys speaking with the principal, how does the ILD and the PLC play into making sure that the school is on track? Because I know often we always talk about we're going to remove the principal, but if the ILD or ILT, whatever the abbreviation is, if they're supposed to be there to support that principal, and the PLC coach is supposed to be there as a supporter as well, how are all 3 of them working together to improve the academics in that school? Because I only hear about removing the principal. So how are we making sure everybody's being held accountable for the academics in those schools?
So this year, and we just completed, all 17 ILDs are actually going through a reassessment process. And we looked at data points to really measure the effectiveness of ILDs. We put them through a 3-phase process to where we did coaching simulation. We had an action plan that they had to design to create for a school, and they also had to go through questioning. We'll meet this Friday to go over the results from the interview process to really match ILD effectiveness with schools to ensure that we have the most highly effective 17 individuals that's supporting schools. So they definitely are feeling the accountability piece. That just happened, and so it just was completed. PLC coaches are actually hired by the school leader. So the school leader hires a PLC coach, and they also evaluate the PLC coach. So PLC coaches are basically a school-based measure as far as their effectiveness. But IODs, we're turning up the intensity around accountability for IODs because we can't have 21 schools that's on track, and we can't say that we have an individual that's supporting 8, 9, or 10 schools, and those schools can't continue to stay in the track.
Okay. So when you get all that together, I would like to see something on paper of how our ILDs and our principals are going to work together to ensure that the academics in those schools improve, and to make sure both parties, if both of them have a responsibility, make sure both of them are being held accountable to what needs to be done to improve the academics in that school. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Caldwell.
So my question, a couple questions. How long have we been using ILDs?
2013-14 school year.
Okay, so I would ask if we could look back to then to see how that program has worked. The question I have is that I think most of them a lot of them came from schools and they were really good principals. So my question is, maybe we'd be better off with them back being principals, or depending on what we're paying them, maybe assistant principals in the schools to drive student achievement. I mean, you know, I'm not saying, yes, I'd like to see some data, but those are the kind of decisions I think we ought to go through everywhere and see, you know, rather than have somebody overseeing the building, having more people in the building that either, you know, that might be able to do just as good a job, probably less money.
Seeing no other questions, I have one question. Dr. Burt, if it's possible, I agree with my colleagues really understanding how we're putting resources towards the critical focus schools, and particularly those schools in my district. If it's possible for superintendent, someone on the team, to maybe share, I'd really like to unpack specifically what those resources were to those schools, because if principals were a part of that decision-making process, I agree, I wouldn't be in favor of making any decisions to alter what we have promised to schools. If we've said that we are providing additional resources for those interventions, I think it's our responsibility as a board, if that's what we said, the track we were going on, that we continue to provide those kind of resources. So I would like to see, just particularly for my district, what some of those particular resources, specific resources that were given to those schools that were critical focus schools, because you mentioned that Westwood is one of those schools that really you need to take a look at. And I do know that that community and those principals are really working very diligently and have been on recruitment, because the utility rate of the building was a concern, obviously, when you brought it forward to us, you know, I guess last year. And they've worked pretty hard in some recruitment strategies, but they didn't get the additional resources needed to bring some of those students who would have come to the school this school year. So that's just, you know, one that I've had some conversation with the superintendent, but I would like to have some support in thinking about that. And if we're talking about community-wide, where those interventions lie, obviously, you know, the Whitehaven Empowerment Zone has done a lot with this vertical alignment. So if we're thinking about how these schools are going to be supported with their feeder patterns, if we have some things that are working well, we should be replicating them in other communities. And if that's just the elementary, middle, and high school, not saying to take anything full scale like we have with the Whitehaven Empowerment Zone, but there could be opportunity for some of our smaller communities that we could be looking at some vertical alignment with the elementary, middle, and high schools. The way we've done with iZone, what we've done with our Whitehaven Empowerment Zone, we should be thinking about that for some of these other communities.
So, Chair Abraham, we actually have the documentation for each critical focus school as far as the resources that was spent, and they had to put a rationale. So we vetted all those. And a lot of these schools also recently received a priority grant from the state. So we can definitely share both items with you.
Okay, and just, you know, just as part of that unpacking what that package or resource looks like, I think it also would be helpful for us, for me personally, just as board members, when we're thinking about what we have said our resources to them. I think Ms. Love made a good point. We've said removing the principal, or we've said adding an interventionist, an additional interventionist, or we've said adding another literacy coach, or we've said, you know, what those things are specifically. Because if they didn't know that they could ask for 2 literacy coaches instead of 1, and we gave them just this, you know, this is your menu of items, if they knew the possibilities, they may have chose something very different than what we put in front of them. So it may be, you know, appealing to say that we've given our schools resources and we've done interventions, but if the only thing that you told them they could do was add a behavior specialist and they needed 3, or add a family engagement specialist and they needed 5, or needed a literary coach and they could have used additional 4, I think we should just be open to the feedback that we're now going to receive in year 2 of them being a critical focus school about what additional resources they may need.
So Chair and Board, you know, what we did was we gave everybody a budget and they got to choose what they wanted within reason. Some folks even were allowed to even do more. So it wasn't that was a very, it's the feedback from the board and the community. We didn't want to tell people what to do. This is what does the school team think they need to do. Mm-hmm. But I think to Dr. Burt's point, we actually had a presentation, but I think in the interest of time, I'd like to share with the board either at the board meeting next week or a committee meeting, but we have kind of the comparison and what they asked for and all that for the board, so we can definitely share that with the board.
And, you know, not to belabor this, but superintendent, I think in year 1, if we gave them a budget and they have not seen the gains, they may have a different use of that budget now. And they may now say they need additional resources. So I don't want us to be locked in. We gave them a budget, we gave them some resources, and we're expecting this. There could be some feedback that we want to get from them in year 2.
But I will push too, though, board, because I think that, you know, the reality is, I mean, when you look at the data, you know, the schools got on the critical focus list because the data suggests that they maybe should be repurposed or closed or merged. So I think that as we look at it, we think that some of the schools obviously, you know, and we see some schools make some positive gains and they'll kind of get out of that. But I think at the end of the day, there still will be some schools who will need to talk about the right action.
Board Member Cornell.
Thank you. I think I need to go back and kind of explain a situation that's in the district that interests me because, see, we had Airways, we had Airways Middle, and it was going to be closed or transferred to a charter because the state said it was underperforming. So then the charter withdrew, and we closed the school, and those students are now going to Sherwood Middle. So what happened was we took a lot of students that were struggling and sent them over to another middle school. Okay, so the question is, and I'm not trying to get an answer now, but what I'm wondering is, you know, what happened to Sherwood Middle's results, test results and figures and TCAPAS and all that when these other students came in, and was there an indicator that these students that came in needed some extra help from the other school that wasn't doing as well, and what help were they given or not given? Now I know Mr. Johnson has been talking about student-based budgeting, which actually might help analyze what student needs are and help figure that out. But see, right now we're in that transition where we moved students from one school that they said was not accomplishing to a school that was accomplishing, and now that school is not accomplishing as well. See, so I think we need to know what happened to the students that have been merged into the various schools. And because, you know, I really hate to see principals who we ask to do more, and then they get blamed for having to do more when the feeder zone changes and we haven't helped as much as we could have. So That's one of the things that interests me. That's one of the things I requested is what happened to those students that went in and what did they do? And so that's it. Thank you.
So I think to your point, Mr. Cornell, we'll get all the data, and you're right. We actually talked to the state about, having some type of safe harbor, because one of the strategies is for priority schools to close them. But if you close them and you send them to another school and it brings the test data down, then that puts that school at risk. So they weren't interested in that approach. But I think to Sherwood, I know when Sherwood took on Airways, we gave them some additional support. And I don't think that Sherwood is, while it's still on the list, I mean, they're not at risk of being taken over, because they're doing some positive things over at Sherwood.
You've already spoken two times. Spoken two times. Anything else, Superintendent? Okay. 2 times. We will be here all night. Send it in an email to the superintendent. Cool. So we're now going to move to the action items. 7.1 expeditionary learning curriculum materials in the amount of $11,099,657.85.
Dr. Griffin. And as Dr. Griffin makes this presentation, I think that just want to give some context around this, because I know the board hears a lot, and I hear a lot about, curriculums changing and EL changing in the middle of the year. I just want to be clear about just the history of what's happened here. In 2013, the district adopted Journeys as its K-5 curriculum. We bought the Journeys textbook in 2013. Then the standards changed in 2014. So we plowed along with the Journeys textbook, and it became abundantly clear that the Journeys textbook was not aligned to the new standards. Specifically, a lot of the texts that the students were asked to read or master in Journey, they didn't have the Lexile level that matches what's required of the new standards. So we never changed Journeys, but what we did do was, the first year we asked our C&I department to go out and try to find other materials to supplement the Journeys textbook. And then they started using some of the stuff that was in EL to supplement the Journeys textbook. So then the following year, we just bought the material so that the C&I people did not have to go out and create the material. So we haven't moved away from Journeys textbooks because we can't until there's a new adoption. But what we know emphatically is that the textbook that we have right now is not rigorous enough to prepare our kids for the standards that they're going to be tested against. So you guys, we've been through this a couple of years. We bought stuff and we tried to print it ourselves one year, and then it got to schools and people had to put it together, and you guys heard about all that. We bought it and it got there late, and the PD that we offered last summer, which was optional, people didn't really attend it. So what I asked the team to do was bring the full all on. Here is what it cost to buy the material, have it show up packaged and ready to go, not just a one quick PD, but a full year on ongoing PD. I think that Sharon and Dr. Burden and some teachers and principals and the team went to Atlanta to see it in action. And so what we're bringing to the board really for discussion and for approval is for 4 modules. We've been doing 2 modules, but the full suite of what EL should be. And the reason we're bringing it like this is because I think that we're at a point where we need to have some commitment, because what I hear from teachers is, hey, we didn't like the way it was rolled out. We think the curriculum's good though, but we don't really want to go all in because you're going to change something the next year. So, I mean, I think if we're going to do it, I'd like to commit. If not, we have to figure out then what we're going to do, because the textbook that we have right now is not aligned to the standards. So I want to ask Dr. Griffin, I think with that introduction, just kind of lay out where we are in the full ask.
So thank you, Superintendent Hobson, Chair Avan, and all of the board members. Superintendent, you did a fabulous job of summarizing my first 8 slides. So with that being said, I just want to kind of show you all this quote because we know that teachers are our greatest asset. But second to teachers is the curriculum that we put in front of our students on a daily basis. And so for those of you who've been with me since my start as chief of schools, I've said often that everybody in our district has one of two roles. You're either teaching students or you're supporting those that do. And in an effort to support our teachers, we have to absolutely put the right curriculum in front of them early. I heard Dr. Burt and I heard Board Member Bibbs say loud and clearly, our students, they cannot wait. They cannot wait until we remediate. We are looking at our K2, which is priority 1, strengthening early literacy, to make sure that our students are exposed early to rigorous content. As we look at the next slide, this is what our Journeys book has inside of it. It actually has 2 components. 2 competencies are addressed in the reading block. They are skills-based. That's the foundation skills where your phonics, phonemic awareness, and vocabulary live. But then on the right side, it's knowledge-based, where all of our complex texts and our students building their prior knowledge and content knowledge happens. What Journeys does not do is address the standard shift. So therefore, we have to supplement with EL to make sure that our students are exposed. Now, I just want to take a few moments, since Superintendent has summarized, for us to look at the timeline. How did we get here? We promised to be very transparent and honest and own that we've had some false starts. We did not communicate and message what was happening and why we chose EL as the curriculum. But if you look up here, since 2013, our standards at the state level have changed twice. But the book that was purchased still has all of the same of the materials in it that was there when we purchased the book. If you come down to March of 2017, we knew that the standards had shifted, and we pulled together a group to create a textbook committee. And in 6-8, grade 6-8, EL is our full curriculum. However, in grades K5, we're still using Journeys. And so we have to continue to supplement. As we fast forward to November of 2017, our students in grades 3 through 5 were introduced with the supplement of EL. And just this past January, our students in K2 and our teachers, we implemented the EL curriculum. Now, as we look at the next slide, I wanted to share with you what a literacy block looks like. The average literacy blocks last about 90 minutes. If you look at the bottom tier, you'll see Journeys is used to support our 30-minute foundational skills block. Although Journeys has information in it to address our reading and our writing block, remember, the standards changed. So we have to supplement that block, if you look above, by using our EL materials. If you look quickly at the next slide, we had a few setbacks, and we've self-corrected to make sure that we're bringing this to you early, board, and we're also making sure that we listen to teachers, we listen to principals. We heard them say we would rather not start in the middle of the year. We heard them say we did not get the materials on time. We heard our teachers say summers only should not be when professional development is offered. So what are we doing in academics? We're going to make sure that we communicate early, that we make sure materials are fully in the schools before school ends on June 30th. We want to make sure that PD is not one time only in the summer, but it's going to be the whole year. And finally, we have to make sure that our C&I, our PD, and our procurement department is tight. We are joined at the hip to make sure that if there is a gap in communication, that we address it early. Finally, I wanted to include some comments from our teachers and what they've said about using our EL curriculum. And you can see up here for yourself our teachers who are using it and are getting the support that they need. They're saying that the questions and the tasks are awesome, and that if we continue to professionally develop them, if we continue to support them and make sure that the materials get to the schools on time, that they feel fairly confident that we will quickly see a shift. Again, this is about prevention instead of remediation. What happens after the board approval tonight? If you look up here, instead of us starting 3-5 in November, and instead of us starting K2 in January, we want to start the entire EL integration in August. We want to make sure that all 4 modules are actually implemented at the start of school, which means we have to have a professional development plan all summer, and continuing throughout the year, we have to also make sure that we are supporting teachers as they identify gaps along the way. As we look at this last slide, this is the ask that we're asking be approved on next week, and this is what it entails. There is a specific K2 expense that's going to include all 4 modules being purchased. And if you look at the cost per student in grades K through 2, it is less than $1 a day per student. We're only asking that $105 per student be spent. If you look at the 3-5 expenses, our 4 meaning-based modules are also less than $1 a day per student. It's only $160.44 as we include the cost per student per year. Now, what we're also asking, since Journeys is our adopted text, we want to pilot in 20 schools implementing the entire EL curriculum. And so that comes of a cost, and we want to do that in 20 schools, of which we've identified the 20 schools, but we haven't identified it by telling the principals yet, so we won't name them tonight. But it does come to a final cost of about $11 million. So we wanted to make sure that we explain this to you, board. If there are any questions at this time, I'll be happy to take them. No questions?
Mr. Orgel, you're recognized.
Thank you for your. Oh, I didn't know if my thing went on. I'm sorry. Thanks for the presentation. So, Superintendent, so we just bought. For how much did we buy the other books?
I think it was about $6 million in 2013.
Really? Okay. And what was our proficiency this year for 3rd grade? Was it
21%. It was about 21%.
Was there something wrong with those books?
The books that we have now
are not aligned.
Yeah, I mean,
I don't really, Superintendent, I don't really mind the alignment part of it, because we shouldn't be teaching to the test. We should be teaching people how to read. And so it sounds to me like this $11 million and all the new training and everything else is just teaching to some test. That it doesn't really matter, because at 21%, something we're doing that we're not doing right, because we've had those books for 3 years, and those children that are in 3rd grade that tested use those books, I bet. And so now we're going to go spend $11 million more. And I mean, I went to Memphis City Schools, which is now Shelby County Schools, and I learned how to read. And I think we had other board members that different places, but you were one.
I was one,
and learned how to read. And I say it over and over. I'm tired of us bringing and there's probably 6 more items I counted, maybe wrong, but I did learn how to do math too. But that are about testing this to make sure that whatever we bought the test for, that we're testing properly or something. It's enough. I mean, we're not, this isn't spending money on the classrooms. This is spending money to appease some state standards, and in the end, our kids are still not learning how to read. I'd rather, I swear, Stephanie or Shantae, one of you was talking about on the priority schools that we need more help, the interventionists or whatever, readers, whatever. I'd rather spend the money on that and see where we go from there. I really don't care about this process. And then that's the second thing. That's one thing. Second thing was, so we have about 4,000 students, I think, in our CLUE program, Creative Learning Unique Environment. And it doesn't have to be an optional school. They're in all of our schools. And I think from what I've asked, because I asked about this, those teachers are going to have to do this. But those kids are, I think, what we call gifted, and they test into it. So then it's not a one-size-fit-all. Like I think you said, Shantae, we need more people to intervene to help some of the kids. And I think Miska said the same thing, that in certain schools we need to identify, like we were talking about American Way Middle, but you were using that as an example for the 21 priority schools. That's the second thing. So one size doesn't fit all. We all have different needs. Children have different needs, and Miska brought that up. said that we want to find out what the problems are. But the final thing is I don't know, and we talked about on the slide before that we were going to align accounting and academics and performance and all this stuff, but I can't believe, and I'm one of 2 board members that noticed it, and I think there were probably others, but I can't believe someone in good conscience would tell us to buy this for $11 million, that they would charge us $822,000 to ship us books, and that it's unconscionable to think that. I mean, I could go and I was at some apartments the other day, and I saw the boxes from Amazon Prime. They're free, and I'm not voting for anything that charges us $822,000. And by God, if Lynn decides he wants to use our American Express or whatever we use to pay for it, they want to charge us 3% to use a credit card. I wouldn't pay that either. I'd take the points, whatever we get out of it. But this is, to me, unconscionable. I'm not going to vote for this. And I implore the other board members, if you vote for it, we don't need to pay $1 for shipping, because that's a huge order. And that's one tractor trailer load full of stuff. And they've imposed, I think Kevin showed it to me, $8 on every order. I guess every book is 8% more because of that. But this is unconscionable. And I think it's a waste of money. And I think it's a burden on our teachers, who probably just had to go learn whatever we called the other program before we had expeditionary learning. I think that's what EL means. But anyway, I said my piece.
So if I could, Mr. Orr, I think that you raised some great points, but I do say that, I mean, I agree with you. I think that, you know, we are so focused on testing, but that's how folks are held accountable. People are losing jobs, losing schools because of testing. So I think at the end of the day, our thinking around this was just to at least try to put the tools in people's hands and give them the know-how, you know, in terms of how to use them, so that if we're going to be measured on some test, that I'm with you, I think it shouldn't be, you know, how your school shows up on a state report card should be more than just how a group of kids do on a particular day of the test. I agree with you on that. I will say too, Mr. Orr, I didn't get a chance to say it, because when I saw this, I said, yeah, that's a lot. We talked to the CEO, and so we actually there's some other probably more cost-efficient ways. We probably could save about $2 million, which we just didn't get a chance to tell you about, you know, if we outsource this to a printing company. We talked to a few to see if they could, you know, get us the material the way that we need it, not just, you know, bundled. So we know that we can probably get this down. But I just wanted to bring this to the board, like, here's what the ask was, here's what they said, you know, but I do think it could get down to about another $1.7 million or so. But I do agree with your sentiment that, you know, our literacy rate is, you know, terrible. And I think that, you know, when you talk about Journeys, you know, the one thing that Journeys does reasonably well is those foundational skills from K through 2. But we've got so many kids, Mr. Organ, that are so far behind because when they show up to school, they're not ready to learn. And so, you know, I know nobody on the board is just going to take the position and just keep doing what we're doing, because, like you said, what we're doing is not getting it.
Board Member Woods.
Is there a contract included in this presentation? So the document that I read said it's not a contract. So I was wondering, we're going to be basing our vote on just bullet points and not a detailed contract. So I'm wondering what other language may be embedded in the contract that we may need to be looking at prior to making a decision also. So I didn't know if we'll see the contract prior to next Tuesday.
Yeah, we can get that to you.
There should, Mr. Woods, be in there. It's not a contract. It's just the item price.
It is included. I just don't know. It's not. Okay.
Yeah.
So just to be clear, it'll be attached by next Tuesday. Not saying that it's signed. I'm just the purchase order. Okay. Okay. Because the document, as I read through it, said this is not the contract. This is. So I didn't know if there's going to be a contract that has to be. Will there be a contract that's expected for us to sign? That's fine. Okay.
It's just, you just.
Okay, so it's just an invoice
We'll
and a
get
PO?
that for
Okay.
you.
So there won't be a separate document? Okay,
We'll get that.
that's fine. Thank you. I did see where they were gonna, it said that PD will be billed at a later date, so have you not negotiated? Well, let me ask this. Do you anticipate this organization providing the PD?
We do. We actually provided a document for you with the PD costs. We did not put that actually on the agenda tonight because we did not want to move forward with that until it was approved. But we do have that information.
But shouldn't that be contingent on this decision also? Because you make this purchase,
Yes.
you can't say, well, we're going to try somebody else for PD. So we should have all the information. Again, even if we're not voting on it, I think we should be privy to what the PD cost is going to be.
You do have that. You actually have the cost of the PD.
It is included?
We submitted that. Yes, it is included.
All right, and how much is that?
It's about $1.2 million and some change.
Okay. All right, I missed that part, sorry. My final question is, I think Mr. Orgel hinted on a number of parts. So particularly the cost of shipping. I mean, you probably can buy a small trucking company for that cost and start shipping all the district materials. Would they be drop shipped at one location at the warehouse, and then there by additional costs associated with getting them to each school?
Miss, how do they normally ship? I'll have to defer that to Miss Isabel. When they normally ship materials?
One central location, and
Okay.
then they will go out to schools from that central location.
So there's probably additional costs associated with. Do y'all not include that in the cost? I guess because it's, is there an additional cost associated with that also? Is it minimal?
So the cost for shipping is also, they're charging a cost for their storage of the material. So once they get the material, that's built in.
So once we get once they drop ship at the warehouse and we get them to a school, this $11 million includes that cost?
It does.
It does not.
There is an additional cost in terms of our warehouse, in terms of shipping. The cost is typically about 15%, so about 1.5.
And I do know this. My last question, commentary, whatnot. There in the past when we came across these conversations around purchasing curriculum, textbooks, materials, there was always a great conversation around going digital, and often the manufacturers or the book companies would say, well, the pricing is the same if you go digital as opposed to buying, the physical book. But then there were conversations around the health of, a kid having a huge backpack of books. But if there's an additional $1 million cost associated with getting the material here, was there any discussion internally around providing this digital content to students? I know we don't talk much about the e-learning programs or the digital devices for our kids, but was there any conversations around going digital with this material?
There was. Go ahead, Superintendent.
Yeah, so we did talk about that with the people, Mr. Woods, and I guess their, advice or recommendation that I think we agree with was until we learn how to use it, like, in the out years, but just like now, dropping it on and trying to learn how to integrate it with the devices and learn it is probably a recipe for disaster. And I think, again, the reason we brought this board, we kicked this around. It's a big investment. I think there is some room to do some negotiating, but we wanted to bring you what the sticker price, that they gave us, to see whether it's even worth, trying to move forward.
Yeah. So my final comment, Superintendent, I think my real final comment this time is probably along the lines of what we often hear publicized when we look at this space of high-stake testing, where schools closures, salaries, our compensation structure around this model, and then how do we look teachers in the face and say, well, we're not going to make that investment if we're going to build a model around this high-stake testing. So I think perhaps when we peel the onion back, the real question should be, is this the space we ought to be in? Perhaps the stake in the ground is, sure, if you want to make recommendations around school closures or around charters or whatnot, we believe that the most important thing is teaching our kids how to read and write, teaching them how to be good citizens, and we're going to invest our dollars in that. We're going to invest our dollars in making sure we can take people who live in their communities, who want to be teachers, and help support them in building strong pipelines. We're going to invest in that. And at the end of the day, if our kids are better readers than they are test takers, we'll live with it. Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Superintendent.
Mr. Caldwell.
So I realize we piloted this, I think, in 6 to 8, and so I've read on here where one of the documents said that 4 of the 7 EL schools achieved greater total RIT score growth than their group of peer campuses. So, and then 2 made significantly greater growth than expected, or nearly 150% of what was predicted. So, do we have any data from other school districts that have used this longer? Because the other supporting information where I get concerned is, you know, it looks like it said 100% of observed pilot classrooms demonstrated evidence that the teachers using the district provided curriculum materials versus 59% others. So I get that the teachers are using this, but are there MAP scores or anything that shows that it's continuing to improve? Because I mean that might be helpful to convince us that this is worth the investment.
Yes, and 3 schools that come to mind that we actually highlighted was Idlewild, Whitehaven Elementary, and Grandview Heights Middle. All 3 of them used our curriculums, and they saw tremendous growth. And we can actually provide you some of the data from the pilot schools as well.
Okay, and so, and is that a broad base of the kind of schools that'll be getting this? In other words, you know, Idlewild was already a fairly high-performing school.
Right.
And so I would also, do we put it in any other schools that, primarily this, I thought this was for the kids that started out way behind.
It is, and Grandview Heights is an I-zone school, so we try to give an example of an optional school, and then Whitehaven Elementary School is a STEM school, and then of course Idlewild is optional.
Well,
so all 3 of those schools showed.
So the only schools you did it at?
We piloted in 6 schools.
Can we see all 6? That would be helpful.
I'll get you the data. I don't want to speak to the actual improvement, but I'll make sure that I get that to you.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Love.
So I have to agree with some of the things that Board Member Orgel and Woods stated. A couple of questions. If we approve this curriculum, what guarantee do we have that the literacy will increase within the next 2 to 5 years?
Dr. Burke.
With expeditionary learning, one thing to note, the curriculum isn't a curriculum that's designed to be the panacea for testing. Expeditionary learning is focused on really students showing their authentic self with learning. So this curriculum is designed for students really to own the learning. They have 30 protocols that's built in, but kids have to show and display mastery. January 16th, we took a cross-functional group, teachers, principal association, academic team. We went to Atlanta. We actually connected with schools as a part of Atlanta Public Schools that's in year 2 of the EL implementation. They basically went through the same growing pains that we went through, that we're going through in year 1. But their data has skyrocketed in year 2. Year 1 was around the teachers really understanding the strategies that the curriculum calls for. And you know, most of the principals talked about after their teacher really understood those strategies, then they were able to release the learning to the students. Our standards today is focused on kids really going through the conceptual process, the show mastery. You have expeditionary learning. You also have a curriculum like CKLA. Those curriculums are pushing kids to show conceptual understanding. Our question for us tonight is, do we stay in the procedural world where kids have to go step by step but not really show mastery, or really do we go down the road of conceptual mastery? Some curriculums now, this one being one in particular, it forces you to do that. So year 1, there will be a lot of growing pains, but by year 2, you should see a lot of data points showing that your kids are going in the direction of standards mastery.
Okay. So most of what you stated I already knew, but I wanted to make sure my board members heard that. So now my next question is, going back to what Board Member Orgel stated, at what point did we stop teaching our children how to read? Was it before the merger? Was it during the merger? And I'm not being funny with it. I'm asking because what we've seen is now the state of Tennessee is telling us that our children can't read. That's what they're stating. So is it that our children really can't read, or is it that the state of Tennessee is telling us that our children can't read? And if our children really can't read, what are we putting in place? Because what I'm seeing is, I know with my children, they were in elementary school. Spot can run, see Spot run, Spot ran fast. So are we still doing that, or are we testing them for their mastery skills to see where they are based on what where the state is saying that they're supposed to be, but we're actually not teaching them how to read?
So I would add to that, along the lines of 2013, the state went to more rigorous standards. With that calls for more text complexity. A national trend was not focus on the foundational skills, focus on the complexity of the text. As a district and as other districts across the U.S., we really got away from true foundational skills. You notice one of our big bets is early learning. We started this year devising a plan around early learning to really frame what the foundational block entails. We're also partnering with student achievement partners who actually wrote the IPG that we utilize when we go inside classroom to really focus on what foundational skills instruction entails. But to go back to your initial question, that piece has been lost over the course of the last few years. It's one that we're strengthening because as a nation, when the standards change and you talk about text complexity, that's really saying make sure the text in front of the kids is the most rigorous. But are we ensuring that the kids understand consonant, vowel, consonant in the big five of reading? That's our big focus, and that's why it's a big bet now.
Okay, so based on what you just stated, Dr. Griffin, I guess, and I'll just repeat what Board Member Bibbs has stated, not in this setting, but in other settings. This is why we need our academic retreats, and we need it quickly. Because as a board member, you know, you stated some things that I kind of knew, but really didn't understand. So what, and you can get this back to us, but so what are we doing right now to teach our children how to read? And what do we, are there things that we as a board need to implement so that our children can read? And I don't need that right now, but going back to what Board Member Orwell stated, since it's Black History Month, I'll just go ahead and tell the truth and want nobody to get mad at me. What I've noticed as a parent is as soon as our children begin to master the standards of the test, the state of Tennessee changes the test. So our children will never be where the state of Tennessee says that they need to be, because as soon as our children, mostly our African American children, as soon as they master those standards, the state of Tennessee says, well, no, you're not where you need to be, so we're going to increase the standards of the test. So if we know this, and this has happened years after years after years, what are we as a district going to do to make sure, like several board members have already stated, regardless of what the standard says, we're going to make sure that our children know how to read instead of allowing the state to dummy our children down? So I know that's a question that can't be answered right now, but that's something that we do need to make sure that we are discussing internally, because our children do need to know how to read regardless of what the standards say our children need to know.
Thank you, Chairman. And as you pointed out, I did go to the Day on the Hill, and it was a very interesting process. And Mr. Johnson, one of the things I noticed, and I think Board Member Codwell has suggested this on some of our items, but every bill has a fiscal impact. What will this truly cost us? And what I've heard in the discussion tonight is that we have $11,099,000 price tag for this. There's another 246 for professional development. Then I heard you say that we're going to have warehousing expense and additional expenses. So I'm not asking you to tell me tonight. Before we vote next week, could you provide us a true cost of what if we spend this $11,099,000, what is it actually going to cost us? What are we truly committing to? Because I have a feeling it's probably closer to 15, 16 million, maybe even more than that when we really look at it. And I'd like for you to include everything that goes along. You know, it's kind of like, I'd love to buy a Ferrari, but I can't afford the oil changes, you know.
So board member McCormick, absolutely, I can do that. And just to note as well that this is not a one-time cost. So there will be a portion of this cost that will be reoccurring.
Well, then I think
and I'll provide
include
that as well.
So really, it's like, what are we committing to? You know, long-term impact. You know, what is it? What is our true cost on this? What is our fiscal impact on approving this? Thank you.
Mr. Caldwell.
So I think I understand the reasoning about why we need this, and I appreciate Dr. Burt giving us realistic expectations of what to expect the first year, because what's hard from sitting up here, other than being so close to Billy and Kevin talking all the time, is trying to understand realistically what's going to happen. And so if it looks bad a year or two, but you said, hey, and the way you explained it was excellent. I mean, I can understand that it's going to take some time because it's different PD, it's conceptually different. But isn't this consistent what they've found with some of the other newer things in curriculum, that actually the old thinking was you can't push these kids early because they started behind, but now what they're finding is actually if you put complex text in front of them and push them, that actually accelerates their ability to learn. So thanks for the part about that, but I wish you would tell us, like maybe more accurately what percentage gains they've had and whatever, and then we can have a realistic, and then undersell it to us a little bit, and then everything will be roses. And then lastly, we have two things on the board document that ask for of the implementation plan and that's the sustainable. So I would ask in the future that sustainability means not just what it's going to cost this year, and this is not just for you, this is for Chief Johnson, is what is the cost over the whole time we'll be having this, because that's really what we need to know. And then I would ask you, what's the cost and timeline of implementation? Because I'm thinking it's probably 5 to 10% of whatever the initial cost is, because I know y'all are overworked. So you don't have time to stop. You can't set this other stuff aside and then start to implement something else. But so I think I asked some questions, but if not,
You were asking, if I'm hearing you right, Mr. Caldwell, you were asking for the data on what kind of gains they were making in the comparison city that they visited.
But that is the experience. The reason we're doing it is we have something that only captures the foundational skills, not the others that show they're implementing the skills, and that's why we're doing it, because that's not just needed for the Tennessee test, but that's what the body of evidence has told the education community.
The main focus for us is from the meaning-based perspective. So Journeys is still rated very high from foundational skills. It's actually like 1 or 2 on the ED reports. But the meaning-based complexity standpoint of Journeys is very low. So our dilemma was, knowing that Journeys is low, textbook adoption is years off, what does that look like? What are we providing our kids in the meantime, in the short term?
Ms. Jones.
Thank you. I guess one question for Dr. Burt. So if we basically are with Journeys and we don't address the rigor of where we need to go, how likely is it that students, and I understand about teaching to the test, but the test is the mandate, and we built a whole district around, we've had teachers evaluated around, and now and we've fired and we've hired and made human capital decisions, and now to say it doesn't matter, I'm kind of perplexed about that. But how likely is it that children are going to move where they need to move without it?
So, Board Member Jones, great question today. You know, we were doing a ComStat presentation at West Haven Elementary, back-to-back reward school. Without having a complex meaning-based text in front of kids, the actual assessment that they're going to be measured against, they have 7 different form of questions. Multiple selection is built in with logic and reasoning. All those different forms are going to be thrown at the kids. So if you're not putting that type of material in front of the kids, it's very unlikely that they'll be successful. So that number that we saw, 21 schools, will probably double and triple at a rapid rate.
So they might be able to read, but they won't be able to achieve in terms of the standards-based tests. Is that basically what you're saying? If they only had the basic foundation provided through journals.
You can read, you can respond, but some of the questions have multi-step to where you got to cite evidence, you got to go back in the passage and be able to process the material also. And
so, thank you, because like Board Member Love, I've been trying to find spot since 2011. And anybody who sits in meetings with me, I've been asking what happened to Spot. Now I know where Spot is. And I admittedly, I was told when I was asked about him that it wasn't rigorous. Scott wasn't he wasn't problem solving. I understood that. He was basic. But he had a purpose and he had some value. And so now I know. So for Dr. Griffin and to Board Member Love's point, so what if we buy this, we go through this, and 2.5 years from now they change the standards again?
Well, actually, I was just talking with Director Giles. It is state law that the standards are going to change again. If you look at the timeline that I showed, you can see that since we adopted the textbook, the standards have already changed twice. They changed in May of 2017. They changed again in May of 2017. So if we continue the trend that's up there, they probably gonna change again. And so we just have to continuously, address that standard, that shift.
Okay. And so I guess unlike some of the comments, I agree with a lot of them. The shipping just blew me away. I just don't. And I guess I kind of pushed back Mr. Superintendent a little bit. I think we've got to shift our mind to digital. It's hard, especially for me, because I like paper. But but I just think we have to, where we can, and I don't know how much opportunity there is in this to do that. But I think $1 million on shipping, Board Member Woods is willing to drive. We can get in the truck, But but I disagree. I disagree in that we just have to. We should ignore the standards, and so I disagree on that. But I don't know how we get there. So at this point, I'm undecided whether to support this or not. I have to read over and think about it. But some things I'm sure of. I think we have to put the higher standards in front of the kids. If this is the only way to do it, if it costs $20 million, that's what we need to do, is for kids. But if it's not, if it's just going to be going in a circle, and that's where I am, not whether we should invest more, but is this the right way to go? And that's where I am. So.
And I would say to your point, Ms. Jones, that if we had all of our digital, if we had all our digital stuff clicking, but the curriculum is actually free, right? Like you can download it for free.
Right.
So I think that was one of the points around, if you learn it and master it and don't put on teachers the onus of now also learning how to do the digital part of it, once you get it in theory, you can just make the technology purchase and be able to use it.
Right, because I know from the other little I think anytime there's a book, there's also a digital version of that.
Yeah.
And so other than the fact that we like having things, why would we need to pay for that shipping? And then you can supplement much more easily when a new edition comes out or when something comes out if it's digital, but with a textbook you cannot. So that's my thinking. For what it's worth, I don't know where I stand on this recommendation, but I don't agree that we almost have to teach to the test. The test is what we live by or we exist by. And so, but that doesn't mean we don't teach the foundational skills also. So,
Mr. Cornell.
Let's see. Where do you begin? The idea that we're going in a circle, I think it may be an accurate description because it started going in that circle in 2009 when the legislature tried to reinvent the wheel. Okay, and the thing about it is, when I went to the winter workshop, some of the people there were talking about expeditionary learning, and it sounded like more natural learning. And I thought, maybe we've actually come full circle. Maybe they have found out that everything else they tried didn't work, and maybe we're going to have to go back to where we were. But I certainly don't want to vote for $11 million without knowing that that's what I should vote for. I think the taxpayers and the citizens, they don't want us voting for something just because we don't know anything really, really bad about it. But they want us to know something about it and be affirmative. And then I think that if it's something that we can look at and see that this has come full circle and we need to stick with this, then maybe we need to, if we vote for it, maybe we need to put it in the policy that we're not going to, it's going to take a 2/3 vote to vote for something else. But I'd hate that Emerson said that if a foolish, first of all, I do trust what y'all do, and Mr. Burt, your explanation was excellent. But a foolish consistency is the hobgoblin of little minds. That's what Emerson said. So the question is, if we're always voting yes, something may be wrong, and if we're always voting no, something may be wrong. So I want to know what we're voting on, and I want to know what it looks like, and I want to be secure that I can go back to my constituents, actually within a few months, and tell them that that I knew what I was voting on. So let's see. So anyway, I'd like to move this to academic performance for temporary storage.
for what?
I'd like to move this to academic performance so we can look at it in committee and then see what the contract is, see what the money is, see what the money will be in the future, and maybe actually look and see what it does, what the books do, what the material does. Because it may be true that we're getting back to, if an insect has 6 legs and a spider has 8, and you take 2 legs off a spider, that doesn't make an insect. Okay? But that's the way they've been teaching kids. This is this, this is this, this is this, memorize, memorize, memorize. Now, if you take a spider and take 2 legs off, that kid ought to say, that's not no insect, that's still a spider. That's still a spider. Well, that may be thinking through the problem. And if they now are trying to get kids to think through the problem, then maybe we shouldn't turn it down. But I certainly don't want to vote for $11 million unless I know exactly what it is. And I'm not interested in voting on it today or next week until we have a hearing.
So I would ask, Madam Chair, I think and we certainly want the board to get all the information. We'd ask, though, if possible, would the chair be willing that we have an academic committee meeting in maybe the next few weeks, if we could possibly have a special call mid-March? Because here's the thing, like we know if we approve this in March, what folks said, you can get it in schools in time, but I don't want to take that chance. I want to make sure. So if we're going to do it, I want to make sure it gets there on time. And I think those 2 weeks could
make a difference.
Yeah.
Okay, yes, we absolutely can make sure to have another committee meeting scheduled in the next 2 weeks, so that we'll have one. So that we'll have a meeting Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. That's where we are. That's where we are right now with the number of committee meetings. Mr. Woods?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Second time speaking.
Yes, it is.
Make sure Ms. Love knows that you get 2 times to speak. She did say because it was my birthday yesterday that I could talk a little longer than 3 minutes.
That is not a rule that we have approved.
But I will not exercise. I will not exercise that. I would like to start by stating, Mr. Superintendent, a restatement of what we said during our commentary previously, is that it's not that we don't think that testing is important. Testing obviously matters because we stated that in this high-stake testing world, compensation is impacted, school closure is impacted, people's lives are impacted by these decisions. So I applaud you, Superintendent, for making this investment, knowing that what's at stake here. The follow-up was that this constant roundabout leads us to make this investment every time that the state changes the standards. So with my legislative co-chair and perhaps chair next year, perhaps one of the things on our legislative agenda is that when this transition happens, that we ask the state to simply pick up the tab here. If there is going to be a cost associated with it, the district shouldn't be left to bear that cost. And I want to make sure that that's the takeaway here, is that this cost is on the backs of our kids who need this investment the most, Superintendent. So while we talk about a tight budget, where do we put our limited resources? Well, we know where we're going to put it every few years. We're going to put it in shipping, and we're going to put it in more books that we may or may not need 2 to 3 years from now. So I recall having books that were 15, 20 years old. You get a book and somebody's, one of your friends' parents had that book because their name is still listed in that inside the cover. So, but obviously in this day and age, that's not going to be the case. So I do want to echo both Mr. Cornell as well as the parliamentarian who commented on Mr. Burks and the great presentation he got. So I guess the parliamentarian is listening because he too agreed that Mr. Burks did a great job presenting. And I also will close out by saying that the 8% surcharge that's being added to this cost may be the vendor's way of pushing us to digitizing our product. So that additional charge and the sticker shocker associated with shipping, Superintendent, may be their way of saying, do you really need all of this physical material that's going to sit in a warehouse when you can simply download that material to a new device that I'm sure our CIO would love to put in the hands of each one of our students, and to have this material at the ready for our kids. So for what it's worth, maybe this time next year we won't be having the conversation on $11 million investment. Birthday, Superintendent, and we'll be talking about pushing that new curriculum.
Call.
We'll be pushing that curriculum to students on their new devices. Thank you.
Ms. Bibbs.
Thank you, Chair. I think the superintendent has actually answered a couple of my questions regarding if we do push it back to academic performance, what's our timeline about having to make this decision, if we're okay with bringing it back in March.
And this is, again, Ms. Pitts, because we've been here before, we want to make sure that we get it in time. So we're being extremely conservative.
So meeting with the actual vendor, their communication to us was 4 months from time that they received PO that they could guarantee the delivery in school.
Okay, so March would be, okay.
And we also know too, Ms. Bibbs, that this is for 4 modules. So if we were to do the first 2 modules, and not do the full order, then we know we can get in there in time. We just want to make sure that materials are there and that before school is up and that teachers can have them and do some PD all summer with them.
Yeah, that would put us in July to even to get it. So definitely I agree with us having some more conversation around it. Now I'm putting it out here around, if we're saying put it back into academic performance, that gives us the first, however we get it, because I'm not sold on spending that amount of money to ship something to us. Clearly we got to figure out a way, if we do go with this, how to get it to us, even if it's on the tech side. But we're saying that if we make the decision in March, we won't really have access to it to July.
So we would have, correct me if I'm wrong, Ms. Brad, I think that that's for the full suite. I mean, what teachers would need to have in their hand to be trained on would be Module 1, right? Because that's what they'd start off with. I mean, like.
Right, Module 1 will open up the school year, but that was for having the entire suite of materials 4 months from PO.
So we're gonna, Ms. Bibbs, did they answer your question?
It does answer my question, but I want to have a probably a more thoughtful answer around it, because we're saying yes, but then I don't want to hear when July hits and then it's like, oh, we didn't have enough time, because I want to also push my colleagues around what this looks like for us making this decision. I welcome the opportunity for us to discuss it more over the next couple of weeks, but then if we are saying we can't make a decision till March of next month at the end of the month, then maybe we would have to bring it back in a special call.
That's what
in order
superintendent
to be able
he
to
recommended
do.
a
Okay.
special call.
All right.
If we were able to have the
I just want to
academic.
have it out here in the public for everybody to hear and understand what that means for us. Thank
Mr.
you.
Oracle.
My second time, sorry, just quickly respond to Miska on that. I appreciate you bringing that up, because we have 2.5 months left of school, so the teachers take off at Memorial Day. If the stuff's not delivered till June or July, and then you've got this, which wasn't included on there, which, Superintendent, I think when you show us something, it should all be, it was represented, the cost us was $11 million, but then there's another $1.8 million in professional development, which was listed down there. I would have rather known. So, Miska, you said 11. It's really $13 million, and everybody else that used that figure. But also, I don't think that we should have a gun to our head. I remember when we used to do a lot of policies, they'd say, we got to do this one tonight. And we're like, well, why do we have to do this one tonight? And because it's got to get implemented. Well, didn't you know that 4 months ago? Yeah, we did, but we forgot this one, so y'all need to do it tonight. So this is a lot of money. It's big for our children. A lot of us have children in schools in their districts that are failing. We talked about that earlier in the night. 5 years ago, we invested in Journeys. We hadn't really probably fully implemented that, and our reading level is where it is at, that you stated, at 21-point-something% in 3rd grade. You've got to get to 2025 and teach our children how to read. We've got to do something remedial. And Miss Love, great example, Cat in the Hat. I taught children for 2 years at South Park Elementary. I just went over there and volunteered and taught them to read, and I didn't do a very good job because they didn't know how to read in 3rd grade. And now they're probably in 6th or 7th grade. So I don't want a gun to our head to tell us that we have to go make an important decision that's going to affect the lives of our children and have to have a special call meeting, do this, that, because the truth is you can't get it implemented and do that professional development in the summer because we can't tell our teachers that they have to come in the summer to do it. So I don't know when we're going to do it. So if you're going to do this and we do it thoughtfully and deliberatively, then it needs to be planned out and over a year. And I don't even think, from what I hear from the teachers, we're even using the Journeys, or we're letting them use the Journeys. And I think we can buy all this great stuff. We can buy a new computer, but if we don't know how to use it, it doesn't do us any good. So if we're going to do it, let's do it right. Maybe we'll all be in favor of it. We see but I want to look at it, I want to touch it, I want to feel it, and I want to see a complete presentation, and as complete as I can comprehend. But I don't want to rush this decision.
So I would say, Mr. Argyle, we don't want anybody to feel rushed because it's certainly a big purchase. You know, but it needs to be a wise investment. I'd say a couple things. We know from last time when you have fewer modules, it doesn't take as long to get in. And again, I wanted to put the full thing up to give a full presentation. I think the thinking about the PD will be different because teachers actually have used this now, so it's not like it's going from scratch because teachers use this all year long. And what the plan around the PD is two things. We're bringing a policy asking the board to require some PD, and if that policy does not get implemented in time, we're just going to pay teachers to come do it for the summer. I mean, I think it's important enough that, you know, what we've seen from our PD is that we tell people to come and we'll pay them, then they come. So, I mean, I certainly, you know, and the timing on this too, because that's happened so many times, that's not the case. Mr. Johnson raised the fact that we had some anticipated savings, and he said, look, if we can get this on and purchase now, we can actually spend the money out of this year's budget because of some anticipated savings and not count against next year's budget, and this needs to be in budget. That's why we're bringing it now.
Ms. Jones?
I just wanted to add, so in light of this conversation, I think we need a plan B, and where we would be if we don't make this and how we go forward. So I'm not forecasting anything out, but I do think we need to have a plan B.
So when I asked that question, Ms. Johnson, so what we will do is, I mean, then the C&I department's just gonna have to figure out, you know, how to draft supplements. I mean, you know, there's part of that would be looking around different places and pulling different material and putting it on a link, so the teachers, as you're going through a class, if you know like the journeys is not aligned in terms of the Lexile level or the reading comprehension or the conceptual understanding, then you could just find different stuff to supplement it. That'll be our curriculum instruction department would be responsible for doing the curriculum maps. And I think what happened initially was when the standards first came on and CNI was trying to do the supplementing, they found that EL was as good as anything else, so they started supplementing it with EL without having all the parts.
So I just wanted to also thank Dr. Griffin for standing for the last 20 minutes. I have never seen anything like that in my life, and I'm just going to say thank you. She does. I appreciate it. But Dr. Griffin and Dr. Burt, obviously you put a lot of thought into this, and we want to make sure that we're also thoughtful on our end. And I appreciate the transparency in saying that we have missed the mark in providing some foundational skills, and that we need to be building that at the same time that we're providing the complex text that we know that our kids are going to be tested in. I do have a question: if these materials, and if we were able to negotiate parts of what was brought forward, maybe there might be an opportunity, Superintendent, for some printing to be done locally, and that's an opportunity for minority contracting to come in. So I just think we have to think through what parts, if any, the board would be comfortable with. I do have reservations about saying we're not going to vote for this, and then our curriculum and development department has to come up. I don't know if we have the capacity to do that. So that would also be a question to Dr. Griffin and her team. If we're not moving to, vote for this item, if we have the capacity to do everything that you're asking EL to be able to do to supplement. So that's another question I think just our colleagues need to grapple with when we have this academic performance meeting. So thank you. We're going to move to 7.2. Mike, we got to move on. Ask a question. Ask the question to the superintendent later.
There's no motion today.
7.2, we're the Houghton Mifflin Harcourt. This is $159,100, Mr. Superintendent.
Yes, this is renewal of our Easy CBM, and this is part of the whole state scheme and testing. Still, what happens is that once you get tested when you come in, for kids who are tier 2 or tier 3, they have to undergo all this testing around to see the progress monitored and see whether they're improving. So this is really just goes to the heart of that, and we have a contract. It's just a renewal for that.
Okay. All right. Seeing no questions, I'm going to move on to 7.3, Scholastic.
Yeah, this was for the Superintendent's Summer Learning Academy. Dr. Ray brought this up. Essentially, we presented a budget to the board, and it was approved, but he realized he did not actually bring the item for board approval, so we didn't want to pay it without bringing it back to the board.
I'm sorry, I have a question about, so with us doing Achieve 3000, we're needing these would be additional books for the Summer Learning Academy?
These books provided over 4,000 students first grade through third grade to start their own personal library. They receive 20 to 25 books each.
Okay. 7.4, Decision Analytics and Information Management.
Yeah, I think you guys had many discussions in the procurement committee around that. Yeah.
Seeing no lights. 7.5, Network Cabling. Mr. Superintendent, 7.5, Network Cabling.
Yeah, so we actually have a different recommendation on this. I think we heard loud and clear, and I want to just say I know how important the issue of minority contracting is to the board. So our initial recommendation was just to give the whole award to one company, and then we changed it. ENA will get the portion that is E-ratable, and then we're recommending the second highest contractor or lowest contractor. I think it's Oteka Technologies will get the remaining balance of the work.
Okay. Seeing no questions, moving. Do you have a question, Mr. Orga?
Okay.
Yeah.
I remember this came up.
Use your microphone, please.
I'm not using it? Oh, shoot. I'm sorry. I apologize. This came up like 2 years ago. Is that a lot of discretionary money to leave in somebody's account, like to say to that whatever department that, oh, you got $2.5 million to spend, go ahead and have fun with it and come back to shouldn't, I mean, that seems like a lot when you were ordering stuff at like $22,000, $30,000, $40,000 at a time.
I think what we did, Mr.
Cut the award down a little bit and come back to the board. I just like to have a little board
So here's what
oversight.
we did. Here's what we did pursuant to your concern there. We just brought every job that was more than $100,000 back to board for approval.
So what's that?
That's every job that was more than $100,000. We brought it back to the board for approval.
Okay, so
because
but
of
isn't this
concern.
a big bucket then for just to?
Yeah, it's the award for all of the cabling, and they do different jobs, so it's an up to amount. So I think what we decided to do with the board's, urging was that when it was more than 100 for a specific job, we brought it up to the board for approval. So it's a master contract, but as they do work, if it exceeds 100,000, we will bring it back.
Okay, but still the bucket's $2.5 million.
That's the estimated amount of all the cabling that needs to be done.
Last time we voted on this, it was $1 million. Why do we go up to $2.5 million? Do you have more cabling? What's that?
We came up with, I'll just tell you, we came up with this number based on some estimated jobs and anticipating some things coming up quickly, such as if we decide to do something with our central office, that we would have the funding in there. What we've been doing, any excess money, we rolled it back to into the lens bucket. So we don't go looking for work when it comes to cabling. But this is also, this is not just for, internet cable pulling. It also includes cable, anything that needs coax cable. So it might be for cameras, it might be for monitors in a hall at a school. Okay. So that's how we use the money, but nobody goes looking for work, I can tell you that. Oh, and Superintendent, if I correct you, you said ENA. This is the two winners were Access Data and Oteka for the award.
So Lane gets it. That's what he said. So Lane gets the unused money. Big bucket.
We will not let that be part of the public in the public domain at all.
You should see the Maybach that Lynn drive.
Are the Mr. Caldwell?
Just in fairness to Lynn, the board passed a policy that said that the money wasn't spent by a certain point, it went back in the general fund. It didn't say anything that had Johnson after that.
7.6, Emergency and Security Services RFP.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is for emergency line services with AT&T for $207,000.
7.7, Dixon Hughes Goodman.
Yeah, this is for the continuation of the work with Dixon Hughes on the grade changing audit.
Superintendent, are there specific schools that are in this, or is this just general overall for all schools?
No, it's the schools, Mr. Padman.
Madam Chair, what we did from the data analysis, there were specific schools that had high risk of being fraudulent transactions, and Dixon Hughes has been engaged to investigate those transactions.
Okay. Seeing no questions. Superintendent has asked to remove 7.8, barring no objections from any board members, just because of some additional information about compliance that he needs to address. 7.8, chemical-based fire suppression systems. If there's no objections.
Okay.
7.9, elevators and lift inspection testing maintenance services contract, $206,316.
That is for all of our elevators, inspection, testing, and maintenance.
Mr. Caldwell.
Are you checking the elevator right down the hall that goes up to the third floor?
It's out so much it's probably being checked right now.
Seeing no additional questions, 7.10, Mount Pisgah Middle School roof replacement project.
That's exactly what that's for, Madam Chair, roof replacement at Mount Pisgah. I think that these were reviewed in the Facilities Committee yesterday.
7.11, Ridgeway High School roof replacement project.
Same thing.
7.12, facility lease, Perea Elementary School.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I believe you guys discussed that yesterday. It's a monthly rent of $14,000 and an amount up to $210,000.
Seeing no questions, 7.13, Whitehaven High School AE renovation of auditorium.
Yes, it's the Whitehaven High School auditorium renovation, $176,000.
Seeing no questions, 7.14, White Station High School renovation project, architect services.
That's exactly what that's for, to address the asphalt pavement, the gym roof replacement, and 88 restroom upgrades at White Station.
Mr. Orgel.
Beth, on the, yeah, I was going to see if your staff would maybe consult with the principal and the assistant principal over there before the paving gets designed, because they might have a better idea on some of the area that needs to be paved or repaved. And with some of the work they're doing, I think they've got a donation they're going to make to us if we approve it on a court area. So I just want to make sure we didn't get it designed. Maybe bring them in a little bit to talk. I think that's going to Self Tucker. Jimmy Tucker, Juan Self, I think.
Will do. Yep.
So maybe we need to just to make sure that we do it
in concert. Yep, no
how
problem.
We want to do it. Just that was it. Thanks.
Yep.
He said. Moving on, 7.15, food storage equipment freezer.
Yeah, that's the freezer cooler rental, about $101,000.
Seeing no lights, 7.16, cold storage facility rental.
This is the lease for the cold storage facility rental. I think we talked about it yesterday for $324,000.
Seeing no lights, 7.17, Egypt Elementary School window replacement.
I think Ms. Love asked me about the Egypt window replacement a couple. Yeah, so that's what it's for.
We're getting it done. Let's move on.
7.18, Trailwell Elementary Middle School HVAC replacement.
HVAC replacement, yeah, Treadwell Elementary Middle School.
7.19, HVAC mechanical projects for multiple school locations.
Yes, just want to know there was a slight change in the amount that Beth gave me. It's actually $38,191,171. I think it says 38,193. And just want to point out, and I know for the board, that of this $38 million, $18.6 million were awarded to minority companies. I think that's just a testament to the board's leadership on this, and staff is looking, and we continue to push to make sure that we are equitable in our spend.
What's that number again?
$18.6 million out of 30,
8.2.
30, yeah.
Seeing no lights, Superintendent, I do just want to commend the staff. You've really taken what the board is seen as a priority in moving this, so we're glad to hear that number. 7.20 roof replacement, Riverview K8.
$548,000 for a new roof at Riverview K8.
Seeing no lights, 7.21 roof replacement, La Rose Elementary.
That's correct. $141,000 at LaRose for a new roof.
7.22 new classroom additions for 3 elementary schools.
Yes, this is for the new classroom additions at Delano, Grahamwood, and Richland. Very excited about these additions.
Mr. Woods.
Oh yes. Did Delano? No, I don't want to mess up. Just mess up. I mean, I wake up screaming Delano because as much as I hear it. So, Stephanie, are you up for re-election right now? I didn't see the steps. I'll wait till Beth is done. Because I want to make sure, Mr. Superintendent, point my question to you. Will the steps at Maxine Smith have to be on the agenda, or that's something you're going to be able to do? Or will it have to be brought to the board?
Oh, we'll be able to do that.
Okay. Should I get an anticipation on when that may come up on board? Maybe next month?
I think I'm anticipating it's going to be under 100,000, so we probably wouldn't have to bring it to the board.
Okay, that's all I'm saying.
So,
that's really
yeah.
my question. I asked Mr. Orgel, have he heard about it yet? So it wouldn't have to come before the board.
No.
All right, thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah, if it's around what we think, which is around 70,000.
Thank you. All right.
Yep.
Mr. Orgel.
I forgot to ask this in our facilities meeting yesterday. For item number 7.22, the 3 classroom additions at Delano, Richland, and Grahamwood, we let the contract. When do we think that work will be completed? So it'll be done for the next school year.
Yes.
Did Superintendent? I want to, because we've got portables at Richland, we've got portables at Grahamwood, and we have portables, but you can't see them from the street. They must be behind the building. Yeah, you can see them back there at Delano. So those are anticipated. They'll be removed and expansion. So when we did the optional program, and 2 of those schools are optional, Delano and Grahamwood, or has an optional program there. Did we make allowances for that? That I think Grahamwood's going to allow for additional children. So did that census? Did we allow for those seats?
Yes, in terms of the growth in enrollment and the number of seats. Yeah.
Okay. But I want to commend all the staff, Beth, that works for you and your team, for the way you did this. And we didn't. The superintendent was appreciated in bringing it up, but that $18 million of the $38 million spend was done with minority contractors is fantastic. It means y'all have gone out and done a job. And I think, Superintendent, you pulled an item that had to do with fire protection that only had 1 bidder on it, and I think it meant filling the fire extinguishers. And I don't know if that's because you said, hey, we only had 1 bidder, there ought to be other people that do this. Maybe we can find a minority vendor that could have that function or serve that function. But of the $38 million, and I didn't ask this yesterday,
yep,
there were some alternatives. That there was the bid, and then
yep,
there was alternatives. So this will encompass all the items.
Yes.
What were the alternatives in there?
So,
I understand contingency. I just didn't understand the alternative.
Yeah. So, based on the system design, we had a lot of interaction with the vendors where they wanted to identify if, when they were implementing the system, if they had technical issues, the alternatives was to cover if a risk happened and this was it, the alternative cost with the alternative equipment was listed, so we would be able to cover that if in fact we came across that problem. So we based it on questions from the vendors about the systems, and as you know, when you're doing a major HVAC and you have to prove it out as you put it in, pump work, number of linear feet, etc., there may be some issues as a result of that, and the alternatives called out exactly what components might be at risk and the cost for those. If that condition doesn't happen, we won't have to spend that money, but if it does, then we have to go with the alternative.
So to go back into
yes, we can
bucket. No, I'm sorry. Go
yeah,
back into
in the best bucket,
and then we'll have some more money to spend on
yes,
other projects at other schools.
Yep,
Okay,
yep,
that's good. So you went worst case scenario.
Yes.
Okay, great. Good job. You and your whole staff.
Thank you.
And I think too, Mr. Orgel, and it may come up with Lynn, I know that there was some money that the county commission had taken back from us, and we were trying to do projects at Bellevue, and I think another one at Delano. And so Beth's team and Lynn have found some residual funds to be able to get that done. So just want to bring that to the board's attention.
Mr. Caldwell.
We have actually built another Delano school, have we? Okay. No, but I did want to take this opportunity to thank Beth and her staff and really everybody else involved, because if you remember, when we went down to get this approved, part of the rationale from the county commission was that we couldn't get this work done.
Yeah.
So I applaud you. We've taken one more excuse off the table, and I think we ought to work on maintenance of effort, getting ways for them to contribute money that don't contribute to maintenance of effort, because as I said earlier in the meeting, they are issuing municipal bonds under austere situations based on 2006, 7, 8. Revenues are coming in higher. They have much greater capacity, so we ought to figure out ways we can get them to pay for stuff that doesn't increase maintenance effort. Thank you.
Mr. Woods.
Thank you, Madam Chair. With the classroom addition at Graham-Wood, I understand that there was a project that may have been parent funded, some enclosure, and that look on your face, Beth, may mean that it may not be relevant for this conversation, but I was wondering if the enclosure project that was in the pipeline is being impacted by the classroom addition.
The look on my face was I'm not familiar with the project, so I'll look into it.
Yeah.
It's a gym. I think it's a gym out there.
Yeah, the gym. Yeah, the gym. There's a gym facility, and that's totally fine, Beth. I can
Okay.
I can get an answer later. Thank you.
I'll get back to you. Thank
She
you.
wasn't aware of the part. I thought we were talking about it before. So is it still happening? Is it? I'll just make sure that it's impacted. Okay.
No, it was just a class. It was just the classrooms.
Mr. Orgel.
The two board members who were there
I'm the junior board member, so
represented
maybe
that there would be movement on that gym.
Is that the junior board member's responsibility?
Now, I don't know if it's included, but we did indicate we wanted to move forward, so I don't know what we need to do.
We need to check it, because we walked the last March, and
I didn't think the space was big enough, but that's the space they have. And they just need the walls.
Walls, I think.
And the bleachers.
So I'll circle back with Ms. Phelan. I think that there was, yeah.
It's my understanding that Delano is willing to take that investment if they don't want.
Mr. Superintendent, so the portables that are at the 3 schools, since you're building this additional classroom space, what happens to those? Because at this point, West Haven is bursting at the seams, and they're looking for portable. So how do we make sure? How do we make sure? Are you saying they're not in good enough condition? Okay. Well, this is just part of conversation. How does that process work? Because when you have a school like West Haven, which is a reward school, high performing school, but they're bursting at the seams, how do we make sure that we are including those in these projects? And that also brings up the question about the potholes where the water, the drainage problem that we're having at West Haven.
Right.
And if we are making sure that those kind of issues where there is obviously could be an insurance liability that happens, I want to make sure that this drainage issue at West Haven is taken care of in the same manner that we're taking care of the steps at Maxine Smith.
Yes. Thank you.
Moving on to 7.23 fuel. I'm sorry, Ms. Bibbs. I apologize. Mr.
You didn't see it?
He didn't see it.
I don't think she did it.
Ms. Bibbs.
This is solely use of the time as if we don't have anything else to talk about. But I see everybody putting their bid in for their reward schools. So when we talk about buildings, let me put in my bid in for Middle College High School. We need a gym. Okay? We need a lot of things over there. I see this is the time where we're putting that bid in. Let me put it on record. I see Miss Avan is talking about West Haven. Let me say Middle College High School. Okay, thank you.
Mine was about liability issue, but yes, we do need to be thinking
That's a
about
liability. Our gym currently is not functioning properly. They cannot have practice. They are not able to use things in there now, so it is a liability issue. Thank you.
All right, 7.23 fuel. Oh, Miss Love, you're doing it on purpose. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, Delano, we don't have a gym either.
Okay.
Yeah.
So noted. 7.23 fuel.
Yeah, this is the purchase for all the fuel for the district, I guess.
Durham and the fleet.
7.24 furniture.
This is for student desk and chairs to replenish ones that are
The warehouse.
inoperable throughout the district.
There's a list of schools that are associated that are getting the desk replacement.
They keep a volume amount in terms of replenishment. So when schools ask for them, we can deliver. So this request is about 15% of the remaining replacements that are needed. And then when schools contact the warehouse, they ship them out.
Mr. Caldwell.
So we're within 15% of being through. So then, what kind of lag time, or when we'll be looking at another round of refreshing?
Yeah, I think originally in 2017 there was a big investment to replace a lot of obsolete furniture, and I think on a rotating basis we'll come back for replenishment. So I would only expect to replenish what we need or what we can forecast in terms of replacing the entire desks and stackable chairs for next year.
So just to what we were talking about earlier,
Yep.
I think at least at some point to get an idea of how much this is this going to be an ongoing thing?
Okay.
And that's fine.
Yep.
But just, so we have it in the budget and we know that that's going to be a recurring expense.
Will do. Thank you.
Ms. Love.
Chief Palin, so do you already have a list of schools that will receive the first round?
I do not believe so, but I will find out and get back with you.
Okay. Because I'm trying to make sure Westside Elementary is on there.
Okay.
I know that since I've been over there, their furniture is really, really outdated, especially in the children's classroom. And then,
Okay.
Superintendent, are we allowed to receive donated furniture from, if there's a business, a different business?
Yes.
Okay. And let the record state Westside Elementary is in Chris Caldwell's district.
Mr. Woods.
It must be really, really close to her district. That's all I'm saying. I just wanted to go back, Superintendent, on the purchasing things for the warehouse in case somebody needs it. So, in this whole space of just-in-time shipping, like how long does it take to get a desk? Are you recognizing savings by ordering in bulk as opposed to you get an order, someone goes on the computer, place that request, it drop ships at the school, or we just need to keep warehouse people busy?
Yeah, so two things. One is we get a better price, and then the other is we project what we need in the warehouse based on usage. And so then it's a customer service benefit to have it right there. And then we can deliver it. Typically, we drop ship stuff to schools a couple times a week based on what they need.
Okay, so you are tracking that as far as
Yes.
knowing, as far as
Yeah.
from the time someone calls, because I just don't know, like, if I guess schools don't have like a bunch of extra desks, so obviously if there's a damaged piece of equipment, you need to be able to get it there quickly.
Right.
And I can understand that. I was just curious as far as the turnaround time. Is it taking just as long for that processing to happen as it would be for you to just order it directly from the vendor?
Yeah, I think sometimes direct shipping to schools isn't possible from vendors because of the way they have to pull a truck up to a school and there's not a ramp. So a lot of times we have to send it to the warehouse first because we do have the kind of trucks that can get to the school. But I'll look in.
I completely get that also. Yeah.
I'll look into per Board Member Caldwell's question on projecting what we think we will need and only ordering enough so we know the full cost.
Yeah, particularly around your transitioning of spacing and allocation.
Yep.
Just making sure that we have only what's on hand is needed.
Very good.
7.25 February 2018 budget amendment. Mr. Johnson.
So for our budget amendment across all of our funds, the budget is increasing by $309,000. There's three areas, three funds in which we're adjusting our budget: the general fund, the special revenue funds, and the federal program fund. I'll talk a little bit about the general fund because it's been very pertinent to the discussions we've been having around EL textbooks. We are reallocating. There's a reallocation of funds for EL textbooks, and of course the decision that the board makes will make that adjustment. Along with that, for special revenue funds, there was a new grant that was accepted that we received as well, a work-based learning grant from the Department of Economic and Community Development. And that grant will be used for career exploration for our middle school students, for about 900 eighth graders across 6 schools as well. And then for our federal fund, there's a slight increase in terms of CTE. We're receiving about $87,000 more than the actual award amount for that grant. And also this year, for the summer, we received Read to Be Ready Summer Literacy Grant as well, of amount of $196,000. There's 4 elementary schools that will benefit from it and 2 charter schools as well.
Seeing no lights, we're going to move on to 7.26, the second quarter financial statements.
So the financial statements were shared about 2 weeks ago with the board, along with our financial audit as well. As a requirement for the county, we're also sharing it with the entire board, not only just sharing it within the audit and finance subcommittee as well.
Seeing no lights, 7.27, the resolution amending the Board of Education's fiscal 2017-2018 capital budget.
So we're increasing the capital improvement budget by $1 million, and this really does kind of this increase is more around a realignment of our spending based on 17 actuals as well. There's a few things that I want to note. So one, we're allocating additional funds to fund several mechanical projects. And I have a list of those projects in the schools that we're allocating those funds for. The second relates to the Delano, Bellevue as well. We're allocating funds towards those 2 projects. And the third is around the CNC as well, related to the Bear Building as well, is reallocating a little bit over $5 million for the CNC to be applied for the use of the Bear Building in the future. So those 3 items are reflected there.
Seeing no lights, we're moving on to 7.27. This is the resolution amending the Shelby County Board of Education's fiscal year. Oh, I'm sorry. I apologize. Trying to keep up with 2 different things. We're moving on to 8.1, the board member strategic school funds allocation program. And I just want to make sure to read into the record that this is the allocations that board members provide for directly to schools. There is an amount from Board Member Caldwell in the amount of $77,534 to 13 schools, and an amount of $8,000 to A.B. Hill from myself, from Board Member Avent. Seeing no lights, moving on to 8.2. This is a resolution recognizing Westwood High School PTSA for outstanding community involvement. And I'd rather read the resolution into record next week, and they will be present for us to do that. There are no objections. Moving on to 8.3, American Way Middle resolution. Board Member Bibbs.
Thank you, Chair. So I do have this resolution that I mentioned earlier when the presentation was around the state's recommendation. So for me, I feel like we need to be proactive around how we treat American Way Middle and not let them wait and tell us for the 1920 school year that they're going to come in and take over and do whatever they want to do. My suggestion through this resolution is for the 18-19 school year that we go ahead and move American Way Middle to I-Zone. So if you want me to go ahead and read it into record tonight, I will do that. My colleagues are telling me they don't want to hear me read, but I'd much rather read it tonight.
So, Ms. Bibbs, you know, if this is going on consent agenda next week, it'd be better to read it into the record, but that would be my recommendation. Board members will also be complaining whether it's tonight or next week, so.
Either way you go, you're going to have to hear it. So
That's right.
I'd much rather we go ahead and read it real quickly.
Yes, please.
Tonight. So then that way, next week we won't be reading it. Okay. Thank you, Ms. Love. Okay. The resolution supporting the inclusion of American Way Middle School in Shelby County Schools Innovation Zone. Whereas the Shelby County Board of Education is responsible for providing a local system of public education, and whereas the state of Tennessee, through the work of the Tennessee General Assembly, the Tennessee Department of Education, the State Board of Education, and local school boards, has established nationally recognized standards and measures for accountability in public education. And whereas Shelby County Schools established the Innovation Zone, I-Zone, in an effort to turn around underperforming schools and bolster students' academic progress. And whereas the mission of the I-Zone is to move schools from the bottom 5% to the top 25% in the state of Tennessee within a 5-year period. And whereas the Innovation Zone provides schools with an extended school day, content professional development support, content coaching led by advisors with proven track records of success, empowerment for school leaders, and flexibility around curriculum, resources, and interventions. And whereas Innovation Zone schools have outpaced the state of Tennessee turnaround throughout the last 5 years. And whereas American Way Middle School has performed in the bottom 5% of all schools in the state of Tennessee on the end of the year assessment. And whereas the Commissioner of Education for the state of Tennessee has recommended linking American Way Middle School with an Achievement School District charter school operator for the 2019-2020 school year. And whereas Achievement School District charter school networks have been strongly opposed by parents, teachers, and other community members. And whereas American Way Middle School is committed to improving the overall success rate for all students, strengthening the feeder pattern, and preparing them for college and other post-secondary opportunities. And whereas students at American Way Middle School have demonstrated the capacity and desire for learning, yet they require additional resources. And whereas student learning is the highest priority for the Shelby County Board of Education and Shelby County Schools. Now therefore be it resolved that the Shelby County Board of Education supports the inclusion of American Way Middle School in Shelby County Schools Innovation Zone program beginning in the 2018-2019 school year to bolster student learning, support teachers and administrators, and provide additional resources for students' academic progress. Be it further resolved that the Shelby County Board of Education supports Shelby County Schools' efforts to turn around low-performing schools without intervention or takeover by the state of Tennessee. Thank you for giving me those 2 minutes. All right, and we look forward to next meeting to be able to pass this, moving them to the Innovation Zone. Thank you.
Mr. Woods.
Good job, Board Member Bibbs, on this resolution. Superintendent, the only thing I want to add to this conversation is, I know, we read your the comments when you spoke at the commercial appeal to their, I think, editorial board around the capacity for, as we look to expand I-zones. I think everybody would love to be able to expand the work that Ms. Griffin and her team continue to do. I also know that during Mr. Burke's presentation that we're starting to see some I-zone schools in the alpha list of schools that we continue to have challenges with. And so I know Dr. Griffin has mentioned many times around capacity, around human capital, around our ability to really expand this work. I've heard folks like Ms. Bibbs and others say that needs to be part of our broader conversation in our academic committee. So while we look at where else we need to expand these particular type of school treatments, we really need to be able to have that courageous conversation around what capacity looks like. I tell you, I got a lot of confidence in your team. The presentation that was given today says that they're deeply engaged in this work. I think it's going to be time for you guys to be able to not just post data points and let us make these decisions. As Stephanie Love indicated, you guys are the expert, and so sometimes you're going to have to say, here's what must be true in order for us to do this work, so we can really know what we can and can't do, because while this is the right thing to do, we need to know that you can do it with fidelity and what we need to do to make that possible. Thanks, Superintendent.
I think Mr. Woods has great points, and I think as we talked about it and talked about the resolution in which we actually are in support of, you know, the driving factor I think for me, Mr. Woods, is, you know, there's not anybody that we're aware of in the middle school space and charters that are doing turnaround work really well. I mean, that's just, so I think our capacity is taxed. I think that, you know, we've been really thinking about, you know, if we do move forward, what's the school leader going to look like, how are we going to incentivize people to go and all that. But I think the alternative, I think now, when you think about all the middle schools that are in ASD and people doing turnaround work, there are no really strong results that we're aware of.
Thank
you. Seeing no more lights, we're going to move on to 8.4. We just have a couple more agenda items. We're not quite done, board members. One more.
So I'm going to jog through this, board members, and just the context for this. You know, we talked about the critical focus schools, and we had a critical focus school, Manor Lake, and I think Jeter. And the community actually came to us and said, we'd like for Jeter's going to the empowerment zone, we'd like to merge Jeter and Manor Lake, which is what we wanted to do, but wanted to give schools time. So I think so since the Leadership Council and the Whitehaven area has asked us to do this and support this, we are totally in support of it. So what we want to do is ask the board to authorize us to go and engage the community and bring back a final recommendation. I won't go over all this. The relevant portion is this proposal. The proposal is to make Jeter a K-8 school, combine it with Manor Lake. You see that FCI. If you've ever been to Manor Lake is a open, no walls, Montessori school. It's in really bad shape. Jeter is a fairly new building, and what we want to do is combine those schools and then implement a turnaround strategy there. So what we're proposing and what we'll be asking the board to do is to authorize us to begin the engagement process, and then we'll bring it back to the board. What we'll be telling the community is if the board allows this and this happens, we will probably just demolish Manor Lake because it's not in good shape.
Seeing no lights, Superintendent, thank you. I appreciate, because this has obviously been a discussion that we've been having in the Whitehaven Empowerment Zone for the last year and a half about where there are feeder patterns to really support the schools that we have created this vertical alignment. So I am I'm supportive of us going through this process and really hearing back from community about the feasibility of this K-8, because we know that we would really like to have a stronger feeder pattern to Westwood, Mitchell, and to Whitehaven with capacity to do so. Ms. Jones?
As long as this doesn't affect Delano.
So it is an official item, but we're going to ask Dr. Schultz to lead us in a happy birthday discussion. Oh, I'm sorry, Mr.
No, just right. So I'm trying to remember what street
Horn
Jeter's
Lake
on.
Road.
Is there a Jeter Park like over where you play tennis over at Bellevue? Is that why I'm thinking about that?
Mm-mm.
I know where Jeter is. Okay. Okay.
There's a cemetery that's right across from the
tennis
school.
courts if it is.
And there.
I don't know if there's a
So Jeter Park, okay, I know where Jeter School is. It's a newer school. It's brick.
Yes.
Okay.
At the corner of Horn Lake and Shelby Drive.
Right. Okay, I know. And so Manor Lake is
on Horn Lake. So it's south. The south end of Horn Lake.
K-5.
To K-5 school. So the two elementary schools that were in that were Manor Lake, and then the other one is where Freedom Prep used to be at Lakeview. Those are the two schools. Okay. Mr. Caldwell?
I feel like I'm back at the unified board of 23 members. And, you know, we got 2 more hours to go.
Yes, with the time limit. One more item, Dr. Schultz. We had a birthday yesterday, Mr. Kevin Woods, and so we want to make sure to acknowledge his birthday because he has told us that he has privilege in how he speaks tonight because of his birthday, so we want to acknowledge his birthday. And Dr.
We
Schultz,
gave him an extra,
I'll take
he got an extra 30 seconds tonight.
Dorsey likes those.
Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in wishing a happy birthday to a man who does not look 80, Mr. Woods. Happy birthday to you.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, Mr. Woods. Happy birthday to you. And many more.
Meeting adjourned.
Lynn, if you can, you can get a bigger cake for us next time to share. I know you run a tight. Your bucket isn't big enough. Thanks, guys. I appreciate it.